Welcome everyone. A warm good evening to everyone. And this is our May meetup. And if this is the first time you are joining us, we are still virtual in 2021. We have been virtual from last year, and we have combined Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg MS, our user group, Microsoft's user group. So welcome. This is our live team today. We have amazing speakers, Sweekriti, Carike, and Gordon, and followed by our awesome cool gangs. We have Matthew, Lou, Dustin, Alan, Pivendran, and myself, Roma Gupta, your introduction speaker for the evening. A big thanks to Microsoft SA and Uber Eats for giving us the coupons, and I hope you are enjoying your treats right now, or you may have ordered and your food is on the way. Moving on, if you want to subscribe to our Microsoft Source newsletter, you can always visit that link to get your latest articles, documentation, and events from the Microsoft Source. And then, of course, you can choose how to subscribe if you want more of the community newsletters and learn about all the new technologies and opportunities to connect with other developers of your interest online and locally. You can always scan this QR code to get the Developer 7 Guide to Low-Code App Development book, or you can go on to https://aka.ms/AACLZNE. That's our Microsoft Community Development resources that we have. Do check it out and let us know your feedback on this book. How did you feel it? We also have on the May 4th, we have our on-demand Microsoft Business Application Summit. If you may have missed it, you can always check it out, or you can go to myambas.microsoft.com/home. This was an awesome conference, and I hope you would have enjoyed it, but do check it out. The recordings would be available. Then we have a Microsoft build coming around 25th to 27th of May. 2021. There are a lot of table talks, dev zones, connection zones. Do register. There is also a cloud skills challenge that's going on. Move on to mybuild.microsoft.com to check out the Microsoft build. Then we have Let's Learn .NET Accessibility. It's going to be a live stream on May 21st, 2021, and you can check it out on learn.net.splashthat.com. So we have a lot of exciting events in May, like Build and then the .NET Accessibility Conference. And then we have our local build as well in June 2021. If you want to be a part of it, reach out to us and we can help you be part and grow together with the community. And you can go on to watch the local watch party at aka.ms/MSDougUnited. And tonight, we have our wonderful speakers. So we first gonna see from Sweekriti about the Chromecast in Xamarin Forms. Then Carike is gonna enlighten us with AI Builder and the Power Platform. And finally, Gordon is gonna tell us about how to develop your software for the modern world using your browser and GitHub. So let's move on. Make sure we are going, this event is happening on the live stream on aka.msdougunited. Please feel free to use the My Questions in the chat window to have your questions answered by the speaker, or if you have any queries, do let us know in the chat window or just come say hi to us. Thank you so much. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the evening today. And you can, if you want to be a speaker for the upcoming sessions at our Doug, you can go onto the sessionized links in the chat in the screen below, or you can also do a hashtag on Azure Tech Communities and reach out to us. A big thanks to everyone again for coming tonight. And with this, I would hand over it to Sweekriti. Sweekriti, you there? Ready?
There we go. Yep, I am.
Awesome.
Let me get my screen shared.
Sure.
Okay, I am doing. Which screen is it? Let me just check. All right. Yep, this is the one. Okay. All right. I just need to check. Everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Looks good.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Hello. I realized I have no slides for this talk, so I just put up my generic "Hello Me" slide. It's a talk, but just no slides in it. It should be fun. Everyone, hello. I'm Sweekriti, or Sweeky, as everyone likes to call me in the community. I work at Microsoft in the mobile customer advisory team. We basically are a team that just helps a bunch of Microsoft customers trying to do cool things with Microsoft technology. My team that I work on, we specifically focus on modern client apps, and a lot of the work comes down to doing cool stuff with Xamarin. I actually joined Microsoft through the Xamarin acquisition. So I'm one of those OG Xamarin peeps. And yep, I'm very excited to share what I am going to be sharing today. I let all of the backstage folks know too. Please feel free to interrupt with questions as I'm presenting it. It's just a lot of like I'm just going straight deep into the implementation. I don't really have anything fancy or fluffy to share at the moment, but before I get started, a little bit of context on what exactly I'm talking about. It's okay. I'm going to play this game. I just like pull things out of the screen today. Okay, so no, let's start here. So if you do not know, let me see if I can get this. I'm going to put this in. Okay, this is going to be interesting. This is, I'm going to be passing links back and forth. So give me a second while I look away. Okay, so if you haven't been to this webpage before, this is actually our Xamarin customer showcase where we have a bunch of customers that we've worked with. It's like case studies on what they're trying to implement, how they've implemented it. And it's not just using Xamarin. You'll see a lot of Azure. You'll see you'll see stuff with Netcore, you'll see stuff with Blazor, just a lot of cool stuff that all our customers are working on. And I had the privilege to help the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, or popularly known as the Oscars. And as a part of this project, we actually helped them with making a mobile app and a tvOS app, and all of that was built with Xamarin. So I don't know why I scrolled away. This is actually a really cool video. You guys should watch it later. Essentially, the idea of this app is you can sort of put it together with the Oscars. It's essentially an app that allows them to like watch movies. And when you come in talking about watching movies, a very convenient feature to have in an app is to be able to Chromecast, because that's a popular device that a lot of people use. So what I'm going to be sharing today is essentially a POC of just how to use the functionality of Chromecast in your Xamarin Forms app. So maybe you want to be the next Netflix or the next, I don't know, Amazon Prime, and you want to make your own, video sharing app. I am hopeful that what I share today helps you in that journey and helps you make, that app. So I'm going to drop in another link. So everything that I'm showing today is going to be off this repo. And do not worry if you get annoyed with the sound of my voice or you forget what I'm talking about. I have been committed by my manager to also write a blog post around this. So you'll see a blog coming out soon on this exact same thing that I'm presenting right now. So don't feel too stressed, just enjoy the journey. For those who don't know what is Chromecast, what the heck am I talking about? If you've been doing what I've been doing all of the pandemic last year, is watching tons of movies, you're probably using, popular video streaming apps. With a lot of video streaming apps, you have the ability, if you have the Chromecast device or a Chromecast enabled, TV or what have you, you can cast your video to that device, right? So Google actually has a ton of support. So this is like, for example, this is Google's main documentation page on how to get started building, adding Chromecast support to your app. It's really straightforward, honestly. It's literally a matter of adding the framework to your app, hooking up certain events, and you're basically good to go. But the main concept to understand is when you're talking about Chromecast and Chromecasting an app, there's two major players in the game. So essentially, the first half is what's called a sender application, and the other half is the receiver application. So the sender application is pretty straightforward. It's your app, the one, so that's on your device. So it can be so for us in this example, in this particular use case, is our Xamarin app, which I've written in Xamarin Forms. And the other half of the story is a receiver application. So for the purposes of this talk and even the blog post that I'll be writing, I'm not going to be focusing a lot on the actual receiver application because I'm going to be just using the default that's provided by Google. Depending on how complex your app is and the types of videos you're trying to cast, you may need to go in and, do a little bit more research on, maybe having a customized receiver. And there's, if you're a lot into, audio, video, and, codecs and video files and video playback formats, which I learned a lot on that project with the Oscars. I have all this knowledge now. I don't know what to do with, but essentially there's a lot of nuance in trying to play back certain things on certain, TVs and with certain audio systems. So basically that half is nothing to do with Xamarin. That's just something to do with, how you're hosting your videos, if you need like DRM protection and things like that. So again, not the focus of today's talk. So I'm not going to be going into depth into explaining that. We're just going to be using the default receiver application, which is just like a generic branded. It just shows the name of your app and you start playing your video. That's it. If you need, fancy overlays and stuff like how you see Netflix or Amazon Prime use, you can customize the look of that receiver and all. So it's all really well documented, and it's just HTML, CSS as far as I understood. You can throw in some JavaScript to do some fancy stuff if you need to, but that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about when it comes to the receiver application. What we are going to be focusing on, like I said, is the sender application. So for the purposes of development, you'll notice they have, like I said, Google has provided framework libraries. So there's an iOS one and then there's an Android one. So you can go in and download it from here, or use CocoaPods, whatever. But all of that stuff is all native. We're talking about Xamarin, so how the heck does this fit in? Lucky for us, our cool Xamarin team is actually doing a ton of work. So do you see a familiar name over here? Yes, thanks Matt for writing these bindings. So Matt and his friends have been maintaining these bindings for us. So a cool tip, if you don't know, they have a nice little list of like active libraries that they're working on, and to save you all that stress, I had it up. There we go. So they are maintaining the cast libraries for you as well. So you don't really need to do any of that ugly. I know a lot of people don't like doing, Xamarin bindings and bindings of any sense. So again, if nobody knows what the heck Xamarin is, I just realized Xamarin is the cross-platform C# framework that lets you write application code in C# and XAML, and then we build it down and make iOS and Android apps for you. So Xamarin Forms is our cross-platform shared, framework layer. So there's good news here. Since this is a native library, we have Xamarin support for it already. So someone has gone in and done like the magic C# wrapper for us. In this case, looks like it's our good friend Matt. So you guys can send him some love out there. Thanks, Matt. Same thing for Android. They also maintain, like if you look over here, Cast is listed out. Same thing for the native Android library. There is a C# wrapper available for us to use. But the problem now is these are native to each. So if you notice, these are not saying Xamarin Forms. These all just say Xamarin Android and Xamarin iOS, which means these are native layered wrappers. The game and the fun thing that we get to figure out essentially is, how do I get this to work in our shared cross-platform app, which is in Xamarin Forms? So it is easy and it is not easy at the same time. It is easy because what we're essentially going to be using is just renderers. So we're just going to do it like just be using native renderers and get around it. So I'm going to show you what, actually, wait, why did I do that? I did prepare a little bit in advance because you know what, it's really hard to demo a Chromecast app. So I did this very awkward video, which you all get to watch now. So I'm going to like zoom this in a little bit. So this is me struggling yesterday afternoon, trying to record myself actually casting from the app that I'm going to demo right now onto my TV. So essentially, it's the app itself right now is very basic. It's I didn't even like fix like the collection view implementation. It still highlights the selected item because that's not what we're doing today. We're going to learn how to cast. We don't care how a collection view behaves. If you want to know how a collection view behaves, go check out David Ortonow's 60-second videos. But yeah, so as you can see, that's the Android app. The iOS app basically works the same way. You select a video. I have a list of videos. I am shamelessly plugging the fact that I host Hello World on Fridays. So please come see me yap over there on Fridays. But The idea being you kind of like how you would have a video app, I guess. This is kind of similar to the actual iOS and Android apps that Google has created too. So it's a list of videos, and you pick a video. If you're not connected to a cast device, it plays on your phone. If it is connected to the cast device, it starts casting it, and the two major players of the game appear. That's the cast button and what's called like the mini player at the bottom. And I'll go into this in a bit. So there's a mini player, and it's what's called the expanded player, the thing that opens up. So here we go. So I actually have the apps pulled up. Some stuff about just how does the development flow works. If it was me, I'd say yes. If I was getting a chance to do any kind of Chromecast work, because you know what, essentially all day you're just watching videos, which is great. So it's like a great excuse to just like Netflix all day while at work. So the development loop, pretty straightforward. You can do it off a simulator. So this is my iOS simulator. You can see my little cast button is up. That's my TV. I hopefully remember to mute it. If not, you guys are going to hear a lot of weird sounds. And then I have it set up. I was like, boom. So it essentially works off the dev. So you can do it. You can do most of your dev work, obviously, on a simulator for a good dev loop. And when needed, you can pull up your device. So on the left here actually is my Android device, which is on my desk right now. So like if I play a video, it is most probably not going to show you what's playing, is it? Let's see. I don't know. I feel like my, oh no, there we go. So you can see it play back. So that's my device. And if I were to cast it, same process, you know, the thing comes up. Then that's the device. I forgot to turn the sound off. Haha. So so again, pretty straightforward to debug. You know, this is a Xamarin app. You have a device, you have a simulator. The only if you need to debug what's going on the Chromecast actual casting receiver, you can pull up what do you call that? You can pull up the Chromecast developer tools. Sorry, the Google Chrome developer tools, because like I said, that's just like essentially like a wrapper website, and you can sort of debug it off that. So development-wise, it's a pretty good process. It's not that ugly. So okay, so let's talk about the code itself, right? So what I have here is Xamarin Forms project, pretty straightforward, really simple. I have two views. So the main page is the list of videos. So like I said, it's just collection view. It has my, you know, that very beautifully designed list of videos. Next up, I have the actual player page. And if you notice, there's nothing in here because what we'll be doing is actually implementing this. So there's two ways to go about implementing this. Unfortunately, with the Chromecast API, the way it is created and structured, it has to be implemented on each native level. You can't get it on by implementing it on the forms level. And maybe I guess you could. It's just I couldn't find a good way to do it that made the process easy to debug and, you know, made everything work as nicely as I wanted to. So the actual, you know, implementation of the Chromecast events and everything will happen on each platform level. So this is the main player page. So if you remember, let me actually pull that back up. It is this page over here. So on Android, I actually took an effort to design it a little nicely, as you can see. So there's a back button, which could actually be an actual button, but there's the title of my video up here. My Chromecast buttons on the right here. And it's in a different color because, you know, you can customize it. So cool. So this is the player page. So this is implemented on each platform. Except like we'll get to that in just a second. But there's two other controls that we need to take care of. So if you remembered from my excellent little GIF that I showed you, there is the actual cast button, and then there's the mini player. So the mini player is essentially just a thing that exists at the bottom. So let me see if I can demo this in a way that doesn't break everything that I'm trying to do. So, oh, of course, okay, let me do this and let me cast this out here and it'll make more sense. Okay, so this is my cast button that I'm talking about, because this, like I said, all of these controls and all of these things exist in the level of each native platform, but we are making a Xamarin Forms app. This is my main page that exists in my Xamarin Forms layer. So if you're wondering, oh, where is that little button? This is the button, right? And this is a little mini player at the bottom right here. So to get these controls to be available. And then like the idea being we're trying to create an experience of, how it would be if you were like in any popular video sharing app at the moment, right? So you want to be able to sort of have this overlay stick around as you're navigating through all the other pages of the app. So since these exist in, each platform layer, we need to elevate these out to our Xamarin Forms layer. So we are going to be essentially breaking down the next half of our problem into two pieces, right? Getting a video to play on each native platform, super hella easy. We have docs that show you how to do that. Okay, you just use the video players on each platform. Very straightforward. What we need to figure out is first hook up these controls, these UI controls that come to you from those awesome NuGet packages. You don't have to really write too much of code to do this. The second thing we want to figure out is how do we hook up those player events to intercept correctly and behave like, what you saw right now. As I connected it to the Chromecast, I set up the behavior that, okay, close my player page and instead open this up. And we need to configure this little mini player at the bottom. And when you tap into this, we need to open up what's called the expanded player. Also, apologize for the very ugly looking design. I'm not a designer. I'm using all of the default layouts and all the default stylizations provided to you from out of the box from these frameworks. But like I said, I was able to change the color of that cast button. You can 100% change how the look and feel of all of these components. The documentation has it. It's basically exactly the same way you implement it in Xamarin. So cool. Let's get into the meat of it, right? So what's up with these buttons? These are just, again, so these are just views, and I'll be implementing them as native renderers on each platform. What are native renderers, you ask? Well, native renderers are just a functionality in Xamarin Forms that lets you define a view on your Xamarin Forms layer, but you have the ability to initialize them and set them up on each platform layer for each platform requirement, which is perfectly what we are trying to do. So, okay, so I'm going to close all this and we're going to get into the meat of things. So if anyone has any questions so far, please Alan or whoever is going to be yelling questions out to me, just interrupt me and yell it out at the moment. And I'm going to pull up.
No questions yet, but as soon as they arrive, we will send them through.
Excellent. If there are no questions, I'm going to assume all of you are experts, and I'm expecting to see everyone's Netflix, clones coming out very, very soon. Okay, so here we go. Let's get started. I started with iOS. The reason I started with iOS is Google being Google. They actually extrapolated the iOS logic a lot nicer than they did the Android logic. I do not know why, but that's just how it is. All right. So first up, let's talk about the first control that we need to implement, which is the cast button. So the cast button, very straightforward. You literally get a cast button out of the box, like I said, from that NuGet package. So you pull it in, you initialize it, boom, you're done. That's it. Very straightforward. Similar-ish process with why did I have all this comment? Oh, yes, that I don't remember. Yes, okay. So similar-ish process with this mini player at the bottom over here. I just realized I'm casting this whole thing off my Android device, and I'm showing you guys the iOS code. So let me do this. Let me disconnect. Let me pull up my little iOS sim. Hello, iOS sim. Let's see. So this was our latest episode. Let me pull this up. Get this connected. Okay, so this is now the, oh wow, I did not put enough padding on this, but okay, so this is our iOS mini player at the bottom over here. If you notice, I click into it, the expanded player behavior is already implemented. That's all happening in this file, right? Again, very straightforward. What they need you to do is essentially everything in this is controlled by a shared cast context. So this cast context essentially holds the state of your connection. So if your device is connected or not, all of that information is shared in this shared instance, which is very, very easy and which makes life a lot easy. Especially when we have elevate these each of these renderer levels. So all right, so next thing, so so basically this cast context creates an instance of this mini player, because like I said, it's all shared. This mini player cannot exist until you have a connection. So because if you remember, if I disconnect this right now, the mini player goes away. So the life and death of the mini player is tied to the cast context, which is tied to this button, basically having the state of connected or disconnected. Conceptually, it's very straightforward. It looks like a lot of code. The reason I have all this other bizarre code in between is this is essentially I just threw in like a sample code of if you wanted to stylize that little mini control at the bottom, this is how you would do it. So essentially, I'm like, controlling things like I want to change the slider progress color. I want to change the icon tinting color. I want to change between light and dark theme. This is how you would do the styling for it. So this is just an example of the extensibility. So you can not only use the stuff like what I am doing right now, which is just out of the box, but you can actually control it and stylize it to fit, the color and also light and dark theming for your app. So the rest of the stuff that's going on is the mini controller view. You need to implement a delegate for it. So essentially, the job of this delegate is like I was just talking about. It controls its visibility. So you want to make it visible or not visible. And how we do that is we're just going to check if the control is active. So like I said, the cast context creates an instance of this view controller. All we have to do is just manually control its visibility or invisibility based on the state of the control. You'd be wondering, hey, why can't the system do this for you on its own? Yes, the system can do this for you on its own. It's not like it's not technically necessary to do a lot of this implementation, but like I was saying, this wasn't designed to work in a cross-platform land. So the reason we have to do a little bit of more manual control on when stuff is visible and invisible is because of the fact that we're trying to control all of this happening from our shared Xamarin Forms layer and not in beautiful native land. If I were to flip the table and we were writing completely native iOS and Android apps, a lot of the stuff would just be happening for us out of the box. We wouldn't need to control a lot of it, but it's not very complicated to do this. And you basically get this, you get the ability to have a control that you can now use for free wherever the heck you want in your Xamarin Forms days. So the payoff is having to write a whole app in Xamarin Forms and just having to write a couple of these controls and your actual player, player in native. So seeing how successful the Oscars were with it, I think the payoff was absolutely awesome. And imagine this in a much, much larger app situation, because if you've opened, if you use Netflix and stuff, it's not just a matter of right now, it's not like just one page, there's multiple pages, and you'd want to maybe let the user have the ability to see that little player anywhere. Also, this applies to audio apps too. So if you're trying to make a Spotify clone, same process. So yeah, so implementing this delegate, again, control, very simple, straightforward. You pull in the Google Cast
can I ask a question?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, if you're casting to a Google Home speaker, is it the same process?
It is. So essentially, there was a part that I skipped. That was the setup and creation of that receiver. The receiver app essentially is all you have to set up. So for example, for this demo, the receiver is set to be is only allowed to be a video receiver. So it needs to go to a Chromecast video device, where you can set up your receiver to be an audio only. And then the system automatically will only filter down to so right now, since it's only TV, so only video for me, it only shows my TV devices, but I actually have 3 Google Homes at home. But if I change this receiver to be an audio receiver, it'll list the audio devices as well. And you can also enable both options. So you can do video and audio. It's the same exact framework that you have to use. The setup will be exactly the same, and you can provide the same, cast button and the little player control at the bottom. All of that will stay exactly the same.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's essentially the 2 UI controls that you need to sort of take care of. What else is there? There's, like I said, the rest of the stuff, I literally have followed the same sample that they use native. So using the same control, same stuff. Let's talk about the actual sessions and how does this magic connection happen. So there's one small thing we need to do. So I am using a service container model to do this. Please feel free to use whatever message passing you want to. I'm not here to preach best practices. I'm just here to show you a way to do this. You need to set up. So what Alan just asked is a good question, because that sets me perfectly up for this. To get the system to start searching and to enable the cast feature, you need to set up what's called a discovery criteria. So that's essentially just putting in this app ID. And this is, Alan, what I was talking about. When you're in that Google dashboard and you set up the receiver, it creates an app ID for you. So that's how it knows, okay, this is the target that, you know, I need to be able to cast this media to. And so find all the available options for me. So whatever you configure on that dashboard gets attached to a unique app ID. And that's basically it. So you plug that value in here. So this is mine, and I published it. So if you were to pull down the app code right now and try and use it, it'll work, and you should be able to cast to your TV. So what you have, what's basically happening here is you provided like, okay, this is the criteria. I've set this up in the Google dashboard. This is my app ID. The cast context takes those options, and once you set this cast options, that's it. That basically in the back just like triggers the framework into starting to search for devices that are available, and prompt get this whole thing initialized and set up. This little line over here, like I was saying, I'm using the default controller. You can subclass the expanded media controller class and make your own if that is your wish. What you'll be controlling is this view. So you can customize this to look better, to have different buttons, to show what, like, change these values, whatever have you. So that's how you would do it. I just at the moment I'm just using all the defaults for this. And so that's how you start a service. So the reason I have this in a service is because, like I said, this is our forms page and not the native player page. So I want the user to be able to like cast to a device from this forms page or anywhere in my forms app, not just to be I don't want them to have to go into the player, this is our iOS native page. I don't want them to have to go into here to be able to cast. I would like to give them the option to cast from the Xamarin Forms page. So this is how I do that. So the cast button, along with that service that starts the cast searching, that's it. That's the only two things you need to use here to get this set up. The second part of the problem, like I was saying, to get the sessions hooked up. So what the very simple flow to understand, hey, what do you mean by sessions? Where did I lose my web page? I totally lost my web page. So this is what the session and what essentially your session management would be doing. You just want to, so if your cast state is connected, you want to pause your local playback, you want to start remote playback. Starting remote playback essentially just means creating what's called a Chromecast media object and just sending it to the Chromecast. So like you just load the media into it and that's it. And then the show and MiniPlayer and enable the expand play discard just happens by automatically because of how we set up our renderers. And the other flow to remember is, suppose you are not connected to a Chromecast device, and which we are at the moment, you want to be able to just let the user go into this page and play a video. So at that moment, you want to make sure that the Chromecast is stopped, so it's not casting anymore. And you start the playback and you hide your mini players and you disable that expanded player. That's literally it, right? So why and how do we get this to work? So if you remember, the player page doesn't exist on Xamarin Forms. We're going to make a page renderer that will hold our player page, actual player element in it, right? So what do I have in here? So I'm using iOS's native AV player, and we have a couple of session management things in here. And you will notice there's an enum that's controlling. So this enum is what we'll use to verify if it's in the local playback state or in the remote playback state, right? So this is boilerplate page renderer code, essentially. And this, so okay, let's go in here. So the user interface, which you see here, is right now it's very straightforward, very basic. So I just have like, I have the cast button, which I initialize over here. And so in case you were curious, like, oh, hey, do I not have to like maintain like the cast context between this cast button and my cast button renderer? Since it's all coming through that shared cast context, which is maintained by the framework, you don't really have to worry about it. That's really nice. You get that out of the box. So it manages the session sharing for you. So what I mean by that is, like, when I set this to like connect to my TV, you'll notice this automatically updates to it. And when I disconnect it over here and I go into a video, the session is already shared for you by default. So you don't really need to like do too much of, ugly management work around it. And the rest of the setup this is standard. Like I was saying, I'm just using literally how they have it set up in the docs. The video player, putting my URL to it, which for my video, and setting up the view. That's it. There's this thing here I have called very nicely set up Chromecast things. So this is where we'll be doing where we're setting up those session management delegates. So the first up, we need to create what they call what's basically a session management listener. So this is what is handling the state for our Chromecast. So they use the word session in the Chromecast API, which essentially means which is like a cast session. So did the session start? Did the session end? Did the session fail to start? And to basically control what happens when a session is started and when session is ended, I have two functions in here. So when you switch to local playback, I don't really have too much of logic here. It just like defaults to just playing it on the local player. If anything happened and I just put in an error, but ideally in a real app, you can maybe make this a lot more nicer. You can like maybe show a pop-up, or if you're doing some sort of tracking or updating some logs, this is where you could add all that logic. When you connect to a remote player, that little flowchart that I was talking about, this is essentially where that happens. So if there is a cast connection made, the first step is to pause the player. The second thing is to create, like this is what I was talking about, creating a Chromecast media object. Again, these sound like fancy words, but essentially all you're doing is just creating and loading all the information so the Chromecast receiver knows what to play. So over here, I'm creating a very simple, basic, media object. So to give it the URL of the video we wanted to play, I'm putting in like the title and the subtitle, and you can further customize this. Things like you can add, again, depending on how complex your video or your audio file itself is, you can add things like your album art, which I didn't do because I'm a little lazy, but you can do it. That's basically where all this gets set up. If you have any, secret DRM stuff, you can do all of that set up here. If there's closed captions, there's a lot of stuff that you can, control. So this is essentially it. It's very straightforward, very easy. Oh yeah, and you can also pass things which I didn't do, which I should probably do, is like the play progress. So like if you were played up to 10 seconds, you want to resume at 10 seconds on the cast. You don't want to like make them start back from 0. So this is where you set all of that up. And then I totally lost where I was. So there we go. So we've created the media. We set our enum to say, no, it's in remote now. So don't, for the next time around when this page comes up, you don't want to make it like, you make sure your app behaves the way you want it to. We don't have any queuing logic to this. Queuing means like if you've used YouTube and you try and cast multiple videos, it lets you queue up the next video instead of forcefully playing. The way I have this implemented right now, there's no queuing. It just plays. But if you want to add queuing, this is where that logic would come in. So instead of forcefully loading our current session, you can actually just add it to the queue. But like I said, completely up to you how you want to implement this. Next up, we're just going to, like I said, you load.
If you're playing like a YouTube video, does it stream straight to the Chromecast device or does it go via your phone?
So all of the Chromecasting flow basically goes straight from your app to Chromecast. So there's no other in between land. So like these videos right now, the source URLs are from channel 9. But if I were to swap the source URL to be YouTube, it'll just play the YouTube video like as is. It won't play inside the YouTube receiver app. It'll play inside my receiver app because of how I have the cast context set up over here, because this is the target receiver app I'm asking it to go to. So,
yeah, so if your device's battery goes flat, it'll just carry on playing on the Chromecast.
Yes, it will. So they are independent events. So once you throw control over to the Chromecast handles everything on its own. What you do get though is really nice. You get that little Chromecast control here. That, I don't know if you've seen it, that little media remote control. If it would, is it not? I don't, okay. Feel like my simulator doesn't show that. Let me pull up my device. It's really nifty. You actually get that like out of the box for free. So let's switch over to my Android phone because that tends to do this a little better. So I'm here and I'm gonna wait. Come on, video, load. Okay. So I'm gonna load my video. And hopefully I didn't destroy my whole cast process. Okay, so you see this, you kind of get this for free. So you can like, so if I would like close the app or whatever, I'd still have like the cast remote control, sort of like the media remote control from in the notification hub for free. So you can close your app, everything will keep playing, nothing's going to stop, because once it's thrown control over to it, it'll just keep that in, it'll keep that context. So it's pretty nifty. A lot of stuff comes out of the box, which I like. But yeah, where was I? Yeah. So yeah, that's it. So you essentially, like I said, you throw that media object that you just created to your Chromecast device over here. So I don't know why I threw this in here. I don't have any queuing. I just said this is probably just me doing something from before. But essentially, you just create a new instance of your remote client and load media info, and that's it. So once that's loaded in, this is where you see that little loading icon, which I cannot, again, very bad at demoing. Actually not bad. I don't know how to demo this thing without having a camera on my TV, but this is where that little loading icon will show up on your TV, and then your video will start playing. And like, so I threw in a little like thing, hey, close the page. So it looks like, it looks cool. Like, oh, there's a connection. I'm going to throw you back to the main page. But essentially this just closes the page and comes back to over here. So. And like you've been seeing, once you do this much, you don't really have to like set anything else up. The system automatically takes over and does everything for you. So I'm going to pause here. Any questions on the iOS implementation or how renderers work? Because we use two different types of renderers here. We used view renderers for our controls, and we used a page renderer for this full page. And I don't know if you guys noticed. Yes, sorry. Yeah, there we go. So this is what. So this is the page renderer. One day I will learn how to present this better. There we go. So this was a page renderer, and this bit here and the little mini controller at the bottom are view renderers. No? Okay, so I'm going to pause if there's any questions just around iOS.
Yeah, there's no questions relating to renderers, but there is a question here about what type of material can you cast? So basically, can you only cast media, or can you? And it looks like the question is directed to video gaming. Can you like stream games and stuff with it?
Good question. Good question.
Use the phone as a controller. So I'm thinking they're thinking Google Stadia type thing.
Yeah. No, that's actually a good question. There is. I'm trying to find. So there is. Is it receiver? There is actually a list. So in the Google. So that is something that will be limited by the Google's ability to support what it supports. It's not something your app can do. You have to check if Google Chromecast itself supports that. And I'm trying to see where that. So they actually have like a list of supported media, and I'm completely blanking on it. Maybe was it here? Default receiver. Wait. Oh, there we go. Types of supported media. Yep. Okay. So let me get this. I'm gonna drop this in the chat. You can share this out. If it is supported here, you can stream it. It gives you a full list of video codecs, stuff that you can cast and what you cannot cast. But I like you want to check what is supported, right? But you also want to see. So the thing is, what you cast, you have to sort of, like I said, you have to create a media. You have to create a media sort of info thing. So there has to be some sort of like source URL where if it's a static video or if it's a live video, you need to like sort of. So I'm not an expert in video rendering and like the video itself. I just know Xamarin, and the problem I was trying to solve is I have a Xamarin Forms app. This is something that happens in a native layer. How do I get the two to work together? So I would suggest looking into the documentation and seeing if other people have done it, and you can piggyback off this basic concept and add all the extra stuff that you need to get it to work. Yep.
Hey, cool. Doesn't look like there's any more questions.
Yes, let's do Android. Actually, like Android more because tell you why I like Android more, because Android doesn't make our life easy, does it? So fun times with Android, right? So that's my little Android dude here. Okay, so go away. I'll get my iOS sim out. Okay, so okay, let's close all these windows. Close all. All right, so Android. So just playing the same damn game again. So we have our cast button, we have our MiniPlayer, and if you notice, I don't have a player page renderer. For Android, I have a player activity. So let's see why and what the heck is going on, right? So if you remember for iOS, I had that little service that starts the Chromecasting, that starts searching, right? Though and Google being Google, they actually they made the iOS implementation in such a way that it actually is really it's separated in a nice, the separation of concerns is really nice, and they make it easier for you to do the stuff that we're trying to do. So they actually behave as separate entities, as like a separate instance, like you can make a separate class and things like that. It's not that easy in Android. Why is it not that easy? Hey, I don't know. It's Google, but so first up, to create a cast service, the cast options provider, which was a simple, cast context dot create cast options in iOS, doesn't exist. Instead, we have to create a class that implements the iOptions provider interface from Google. And then we get to come inside of this class. And this is where we set up all of the, information on how we need our cast to behave. So things like that application ID from before, it gets set up here. But then there's some other stuff. So remember how, let me pull up that iOS service. So, we can see what I'm talking about. So this was our iOS service, and this is my Android service. So with iOS, so beautiful, so easy. Create a shared instance. Use default true. Here is my ID. I have like freaking 50 lines of code here to do the same nonsense in Android, right? But why? Who knows? But this is what's going on. So we're doing essentially the same thing theoretically, but with more lines of code. So we're setting the set receiver ID. This is the cast options. We are building the cast options. So we're putting it in here. The 3 extra things that I have set up over here are not necessarily extra. You kind of need them. What you're doing over here is we are setting up our default media, that little, we're setting up not the little player, we're setting up that expanded player. So like I said, I just wanted to use the default ones. If you look at the cast sample for Android, they actually do they make they actually subclass this expanded controller and do some fanciness inside of it. I did not want to do that. So instead, what I decided to do was, hey, I want you to put like these buttons in it. And I want you to use the default cast activity. So this is essentially what's provided for free in the framework. Although if you are trying to customize your expanded player to do something special of your own, instead of pointing to this class, you want to point to your class. But to note, these names are a little like weird, and so the best way to handle it in Xamarin is to register it yourself. So like how this class has been registered with this particular path, you want to, when you make a new subclass for this expanded controller activity and do your own stuff in it, make sure you register the path so then it's easier for you to put it down over here. Because if not, you have to, I don't know, unzip your thing, find out what, because the way and like Xamarin compiles things, you may not find the exact path to it. So yeah, or maybe hit up Matt, maybe he knows, who knows. Yep. So essentially what we're doing here is like, hey, just use the default class. I don't need anything else. Same process here. Set up the default class for the expanded controller. And there's this little launch options things. It does honestly nothing. I've not seen anybody do anything special with it, but the syntax requires it. So there you go. You have to put it in here. So essentially, we're building up this builder very similar to iOS. We're like, hey, this is my receiver. Hey, use the default expanded controller and start looking for castable devices. Once you've done this, then comes the next fun part. How do we connect this up? It doesn't automatically start it. There's no place to go cast options start. There's no API call like that. Instead, you need to register this in the app manifest. Okay, so I should have actually opened this, but let me pull this up right now. So there is a, oof, I forgot to change my theme up for this, but let's zoom in, right? So that cast options, like the options provider, this is how you register it. So the next step after this is you need to tie in to the framework. You need to provide the options class name. And so you remember this little line that I put over here. This was so it was easier for me to basically point to this particular class implementation in my Android manifest. So this is, this framework needs it this way. If there's any other framework that you come up with that needs you to like put any particular value and point to a class in your code, that's a nice little way to do it. If you've seen Xamarin binding source code, this is kind of, you see this all over the place. It's the same basically way to do it. Okay, so next up, what do we have? Next up, we have for the, oh yeah, this is just the styling stuff. So we'll get back to this. There's nothing else. That's all you basically have to do in, so you set up this class and you point this class in the Android manifest. And that's it. So that is the equivalent of that service that was implemented in iOS. The other stuff that we have to do now is let's set up our buttons. So let's talk about that cast button. So again, Android isn't as separated, like I was trying to say, like the iOS implementation is, but in the Google Cast button essentially is just a basic media route button. So all you're doing in this renderer for this, view renderer is basically just setting up a media route button. It's a little tricky. So by virtue of that cast options provider, the button will get initialized for any native page that you implement. But like I said, we're trying to like fix this to work on the forms level. So this is a little bit of hacky jiggery I had to do where, I forced the media route selector to, look particularly for your app ID. This is unfortunately the only good way to do it, to force it to start searching for your cast devices and enable the cast button in the Android for Android in the forms layer. So the cast options that we set up automatically enable this button for us, but unfortunately we need to do a little bit of this hacky work over here to force it to also enable itself on the forms layer. So it's essentially, it's not super hacky. It's just like manually setting up that media route selector instead of getting it free from the cast service. So yep, and after that, it's just setting up essentially the callbacks for a media route button. So if you've done Android development, this should look fairly, familiar to you. So just setting up, the selectors and setting and starting it up. That's it. The rest of it is, yeah. So again, this button is inside of a linear layout. So just, setting up that media route button, and that's about it. So that initializes your cast button. For the MiniPlayer, it's a, what was the deal here? So there was a bit. So the MiniPlayer itself on Android is a fragment. So it's there's a little bit of fragment, management that had to be done to make sure that it initializes and disposes something. Yep. Basically, what we're doing is the MiniPlayer fragment is attached to a layout. So when you come into Android, you're going to be having to make a bunch of like layout files. So that's literally how the system, like the API, is expecting these views to be. So our MiniPlayer layout is actually not that complex. It's literally just got, like I was saying, I'm just going to change this out. So it's just got that one fragment. That's a mini controller. That's it. And the actual fragment itself comes from, like I said, the framework. So you're not doing much. You're just sort of just like initializing this. This is how you would do it when you're adding this to a native Android app. So you'd have this fragment and you'd add this fragment to the bottom of every page you want the MiniPlayer to be visible in. So oops, that's what we are. So we're basically inflating that, adding it to the view, and boom, that's it. that's all that's happening over here. And you just want to do a little bit of fragment management to make sure that when there is no there's no casting happening, that it does remove this fragment and clear it out. So again, this didn't come for free because, like I'm saying, we're having to do a little bit of manual setup because we're breaking out of the norm of letting the system handle all this on its own. We're like, hey, no, we want to do this for form support as well. So since this is a whole view we're creating from scratch, kind of how you would do for any other view renderer, this is how it works. All right. So the last bit to get everything to work in Android, the session management is exactly the same as it was in iOS. The only change now is the only change now is the way we implement this. So you'd be wondering for iOS. Okay, let me close a bunch of these. So many folders. Okay, so in iOS, if you remember, I actually had this as a page renderer, piggybacking off a page renderer implementation that you can do in Xamarin Forms. This, unfortunately, at the moment is a activity. It is not a page renderer. So what happened was, as I was trying to implement this as a page renderer, I am not entirely sure why it wasn't working, but Android just refuses to sort of initialize the cast context and pass the media controls around like I wanted it to as a page renderer. So it's something I'll keep investigating. There's probably just some initialization I did wrong, but instead what I've done is I've just basically embedding this native activity into a forms page. So if you're curious, like, what the heck is she talking about? So what I have done is, let's open up. No, why did I go into the? So that little handy service that I have. So what it does on Android is, so on Android, we bypass, instead of opening that player page, we start a new Android intent, and I pass essentially the player activity that I have set up here. So it's slightly different in that sense. So we're not going to be using a page renderer, but at the end of the day, it is still just a regular, Android activity. So not super different, but just a little different. But the actual code in this implementation would still be the same if I had done this in a page renderer or in this activity that I have. So same process like we saw in iOS, we have the video view and the media controller. So this is again what is the actual, let me get that back up here again. So this is this page over here that you see. This is this activity that I'm talking about. And okay, let me just pause this before. Okay, and so we've got the video view, the video controller, this media route button. This is that cast button. This is the back button. This is the text view. All of this is laid out in its own layout file. So when you look at on create, I'm basically just, pulling up the page, a layout that I've already created. So let's see if you want to see what that looks like. If I can remember that I'm in actually Android. So let me pull this up. All right, so what's happening here? Let's take a look. It's just a simple relative layout. I have my video view, I have the button, the text view, and our good friend, the media route button. And I threw in, so this was actually not the right way to do it. You can tint the button here if you want to, but a lot of the styling for everything that's Android is actually just controlled in the styles file. So this is actually where it pulls up the media route button, not in that layer. Same way you can stylize your mini controller, you can stylize your expanded mini controller, all of it. So like I have the expanded mini controller, I don't have a style set up for it because like I said, I'm using defaults, but if you need to come in here, put in your colors, whatever you want to add in here, and that will stylize your player for you. So let's go back. So we have our layout. I set up my layout. I am going to go back to the player activity. So on create, standard procedure, we're setting up the button, setting up the cast button. You notice it's like setting up a media route factory because it's a media route, similar to how we did the cast button renderer, same-ish process. Then we're going to do the good old session management. So let's go look at what this session management looks like. If you remembered how it looked like on iOS, it's literally the same. They even use the same session names. So on ended, on resumed, on failed, on started. So literally how you had it set up in iOS, I basically followed the same process over here. So it calls the particular, method when it's in the particular session that it needs to be in. So when the session is connected, so when it's not connected, my great error message at the moment to stay here. But like I said, you can do all your logging, error logging, whatever happened over here. When the session is connected, I just check that if the local player was playing, I pause it, I change it to remote, and we, similar to how it was on iOS, we load it into we load that media that the media object that we create, we load it into the remote client. So again, if you remembered how that iOS code looked like, that we just looked at, same exact process. The cast session has a remote media client. We grab that client, we load our video in it. This is what I was talking about. You can put in the seek position that you needed to go to, and then you hit play. And that's when this does that loady icon and puts it up on your Chromecast receiver. Creating this media object, again, very, very similar. Like I said, it's the same, metadata information that we were setting up on iOS, same exact process. You put in the name, you put in subtitle information. This is where you'd also initialize things like your poster art, that little, oh my God, why does this thing keep hiding all the time from me? There we go. So, if you needed to do, come on. Okay. So, nope, go back up. Okay. So let me cast this out. So if you needed to, so I have a title, I have the subtitle. If you need a poster art, you can put that value here. If you have subtitles, like this has no subtitles, so this is disabled. So if you have subtitles, things like that, you can set up all of that media information over here. Literally the same process. Load it into your remote client and hit play, and it starts playing it on your Chromecast device. And then you get this beautiful behavior that we're getting. So you have these forms controls now, which can now be stuck into any forms page that you need to go to, and display them like I was saying in YouTube, or you have that little player and the cast button available to you in whichever page you go to. So you can write all those pages and all that logic in Xamarin Forms, share a ton of code, make it super efficient. And it's just these. So you basically, if you look at the total sum amount of work, there's 2 view renderers for your cast button and your MiniPlayers, and it's the actual player itself. So then that's the only other sort of native code that you'd be writing. So I'm going to now stop again. This is actually it. There's nothing more. I showed you how to do it in Android and I showed it in iOS. So I'm going to stop here for any other follow-up questions.
There's no questions in the Q&A.
Excellent. Excellent.
But just a side question. What is the advantage of doing a page renderer instead of an activity? Why would you do the page renderer?
So in ideal best practice land, all of these are renderers, right? So all my controls are renderers. So, and when you do a Xamarin Forms page, you navigate from this main page. When I press a button, I'm navigating to another page. So ideally, to keep everything in, in good forms land, I'd love for this page to have been like how it is on iOS. Did I hide my? Yep, I did. So like in iOS, this is a page renderer, and then I get this back button for free. And if I want to do a mix of like forms controls and native controls, it's easier to like manage, and your code becomes cleaner essentially. Okay. So to do it as a page renderer.
So it's more consistency thing than a.
Yeah. But there's like another caveat to it also, like for example, so right now, so this is a little deep into it, maybe a little tangent. So like right now we're assuming, and I'm right now, like if in each of these, both the samples, I'm using the native video views. So I'm using the AV player on iOS, and I'm using the video, the media element in Android, right? What if, so for example, you're using some third, so like I said, the land of video playback is complex and a beast of its own. So maybe you're using a third-party renderer or a third-party video client or something, because they're doing DRM management for you and piracy protection and things like that. So and like it happened to be in the case of like the Oscars, the video player that they wanted to use, we had to create a custom binding project for them because that wasn't supported out of the box for Xamarin. So in a situation like that, it just made sense. Those video players having to then create another shared, creating a whole Xamarin control for them just like didn't make sense. So we just like, okay, let's just use it as is in the native containers because it's only isolated to one page in the app. So there's a bunch of different things, but the reason I brought that up is this implementation is agnostic to what video player you use. So you could attach it to, like I said, this default player. You can attach it to any custom playback, player that whatever you want to use, as long as you have access to the session management. So play, pause, and all that kind of stuff. That's all you basically need to hook up all the sessions to work.
Okay, very cool. Just checking if there's any more questions. Doesn't look like it. I think everyone is eating.
Yeah, I was like,
Excellent.
I see a question here and I'm like munching food falling out of my mouth as I try and swallow. That's just a question for Tizen, but I think that goes to anything really. Is it just Android and iOS? Do you know of any other platform? Is it a compatible API? It's like, oh no, let's say I've got some Xbox, I don't know, Coke bottle. I've got a Coke bottle system here. It runs on a Coke bottle OS. How is it? Is it like a library like this Cast? Is it like a generic thing, or is it like Google specific, or how does that work?
It's Google specific. It's Google specific. So the actual Cast framework, we're just using what Google's provided to us. We're not writing that whole Cast framework ourselves. So whatever Google supports, we support. So if there is a Google, if that Google, like I said, I dropped in the documentation, so you can just go explore that documentation. If they support targeting to whatever system that you want to target to, or your target doesn't matter because that target is essentially on the for your mobile app. It only views it in the form of this app ID. So it can target whatever app ID you point it to. So it just depends on what Google supports and are you able to set up a receiver for this to target to. That's it.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Please don't die, man. I need to keep writing the bindings for this.
Yeah.
Choke on your.
Yeah, okay. That is a question. Can you cast from Windows?
Can you cast from? Nope, I have not seen a UWP framework from Google, at least not yet. So I do not know. You can. There is Cast is enabled for Chrome browsers, so that's like the closest thing I can think of.
Oh, yes.
But there's no UWP or WinUI framework that I've seen from Google. Unfortunately, all of the casting capabilities is on Google. So if they don't support it, we can't support it, unfortunately. So.
Does it work with Windows Phone?
I am a huge Windows Phone fan. I don't know if you guys have followed me on Twitter, but if it did, I would have implemented already, friend, and it does not. So I am very sad.
Yeah, and then the next follow-up question, can you do it from Silverlight?
Oof. Yes, let's just bring back all that old technology.
Conversation just got dark, making me go to a sad place.
So on the receiver end, is it nothing? Nothing needs to be done. So I can go buy a brand new TV out of the shop now and don't have to install anything or set anything up. Besides maybe log into a Google thing, or do you have to install an app, or do I have to write a receiving app?
Good question. Hardware side of things, as long as if your TV has Chromecast built in, so certain TVs come with that Cast hardware built in. If not, you'll need to buy a Chromecast device for if I can type, one of these things. You need to buy one of these and connect it to your TV, and that is the hardware that this casts to. For the receiver app itself, let me pull that up. So for your actual receiver, there's actually there's no public store. Unlike an iOS or Android app, you don't have to publish it to any place. It doesn't have any. There's no like publishing of any sort. So like essentially, you just go to this dashboard, and I'm not signed in over here. Excellent. Actually, am I signed in here? Oh, yes, I'm signed in here. My bad, sorry. I'm in between browsers at this moment. So So like this is kind of what that looks like, the dashboard. And you just create, so this is the sample that we're working with right now. And this is it. So you don't technically have to publish it. If you leave something unpublished, so like if I were to hit unpublished to this right now, it means nobody else in the world can cast to it, only your registered devices can cast to it. If you publish it, like I have done right now, then everybody, because I love everyone, I want you all to be able to cast to it. So that's about it. So you just like create a new application over here, you get this app ID, and that's it. That's all that. And that's all you need to do for a default receiver. If you want to do one of these fancy stylized receiver, then there's a little bit more work on your end. You have to find like you have to create an Azure app service, or you basically have to host it like a website and then provide the URL to it in that dashboard. So if you're using the default, free receiver that Google provides to you, there's nothing to do. But if you want to do something custom of your own, then you have to do a little bit of setup. The default's not too bad. Like you saw it, right, in my little ugly little thing. Like you look at that. Like when I cast it, like it's like a black screen with the title on it. It's not too terrible, but some people like it to be fancy. So.
And sort of along those lines, let's just say I'm writing an app, let's say Netflix. I've got the app on the TV and the app on the phone. Would I use Chromecast to say Chromecast like from my phone to my app, or would I say, okay, let's Chromecast it just for when there is no app on the TV device? Because I suppose
so that's that's something really nifty that Google has implemented. It kind of like what's that word? I'm totally forgetting the thing that they do. But essentially, this is by default, you don't need to have any sort of like app installed or something. There's no concept of a Chromecast. There's no like app store for Chromecast or anything. It's like I said, you just like you have it in that dashboard. You create it in the Chromecast land, I guess. It's like knows these things are existing and it does it for you. What Netflix does is, so they have like a Android. So if you have like an Android TV or an Apple TV or whatever, so like they have those specific TV apps. Specifically, if you have an Android TV and you try to cast it, sometimes Netflix does like there's this new implementation of the cast framework that you can piggyback, like if there's an installed app, to cast it through that app. So those are like that's a little complex. Next level of complex territory, and that's a little different in the architecture and implementation of your app. But very, very simply pulling it down, you can have casting support without having to write a particular app for a target TV platform. Those are independent things. So like right now, I didn't write any app for the thing that's running on my TV. That's just what, like I said, that receiver, which is a glorified HTML wrapper, that's it. But if you did have an app, you could set it up like app links, like, deep linking, sort of something. It's kind of similar, but not exactly deep linking, but it kind of does something similar. If it finds that, oh, you're casting to an Android TV and you already have that app, I'm going to just play it for you on that app. So it's a little different, and you have to do a little more different implementation with it. But you don't need an app to cast. That's all I'm going to say.
That was awesome, Swiki. We don't have any more questions in the chat window, so I'm assuming Excellent. All of our attendees are happy with this. And thank you again, Swiki, for being with us tonight at the Doug. Guys, please follow her on LinkedIn and Twitter, and do give her a feedback of how amazing she was. And coming up next, I have Carike with us, who's gonna talk all about AI and our platform. So, Carike, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much, Rama.
Hi. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Swiki really put the bar quite high, hey? Well done, Swiki. It was an awesome talk. It's going to be hard to follow that one. Gosh. But yeah, welcome everyone. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Let's just get that up and running. Yeah, so Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Yeah, so actually around about the same time that last year, Donna Sarko was sharing about AI Builder as well. So I was very happy to see that we're not sharing on the same model. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide. Who am I? My name is Carike. I'm a development consultant for iSolve Business Solutions. You can follow me on Twitter at Carike_B. As many of you know, you'll see on my profile as well, I'm born again child of God. And this is the hashtags that I follow. If you want to learn anything more about the Power Platform, these are the tags to follow. There's a host of information being shared. The community is such an awesome community. You can absolutely ask any question any time of the day, and there will surely be someone that will assist you. Cool, so let's look at what's on the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Power Automate is, what AI Builder is, and then obviously there's going to be demo time because here we are all about the doing and less about the talking. Cool, so what is Power Automate? Power Automate, I made a note because I thought about it. I was like, it's appropriately named Power Automate because it gives users the power to automate the tasks that they have to complete repetitively through a manual process. So basically what that means is it helps users, it's pretty much workflow, and it helps business users especially to quickly automate tasks or the mundane tasks that they have to do repetitively. And Power Automate allows them to automate those processes, the business processes. It's an application that's part of the Microsoft Power Platform. If you guys haven't heard of the Microsoft Power Platform, first of all, where have you been? Secondly, please read up about it. There's a lot happening in that space. And like Donna mentioned last year as well, and this topic has been growing, you'll hear a lot more about fusion devs. So it's where you get non-technical developers merging with the technical developers, and you get to create wonderful applications with people not necessarily needing to be technical, and they can still create wonderful apps. People have been creating life-changing apps, and then they are your business users, you know, finance, HR. Focus on complex, the more complicated technologies that they need to focus on. Cool. So that's Power Automate. What is AI Builder? AI Builder is they call it a capability of the Power Platform. So basically what it does is the applications that you get that's part of the Power Platform, AI builds onto that and just improves the applications that you can build or the workflows that you can build with this. AI Builder can be used within PowerApps and Power Automate. What AI Builder also is it helps, once again, the non-technical people to build models without having to code, because we all know as technical people the difficulty level required to build AI models, like it can become really intricate, you know. So AI Builder is something that non-tech people can use, and it's so quick to set up that they can have tasks that's mundane to them, quickly just resolve it. So what can you do with AI Builder? Because a lot of people would ask, okay, it's cool, but how do I use it? So AI Builder has quite a few pre-built models that you can use. One, like here, the examples, it says with AI Builder, you can analyze text for classification, key phrases, language, and sentiment. You can pull sentiments from, if you're a business that uses social media, you can get sentiment from posts that's linked to you as a company. You can predict whether something will happen, like if you feed it information from the databases, you can predict what the future holds for the business. I can imagine how this would help, like, for instance, the finance people and perhaps maybe even HR going forward, like with skills development within the business. So there's really a lot that you can do with AI Builder. So what we're going to focus on is, I'm just going to go to the next slide, which is demo time, yay. But I just want to explain a little bit how I got to this. It's a case study that came up recently because I was having a conversation with my aunt, and she was mentioning to me that they are scanning over 1,000 invoices monthly, and she has to manually go and rename each of those invoices to the invoice number. And I was like, why are you doing that? And she said, yeah, it really takes a lot of her time because she's an accountant, and they actually got people to come in. Obviously, you told them that they require a very complex system, and they quoted them a huge amount as well. And that actually got me thinking that, hey, but I know about AI Builder, so she could probably do this herself without the need of having a complex system for something so simple. And hence, that's where I got to the demo or to start creating this content. So without further ado, I'll just jump to what I want to do. So I started with a SharePoint list. So what I did was I just created a plain SharePoint list because what I wanted to do was pull the information from the scanned file and save it to a list for any scenario that someone might want to use this information. Just a disclaimer, the data is completely fictional, so don't get excited if you see details. It's completely made up. I'll show you what I did.
Is it possible to just zoom in the browser, but even though it's not real data, we don't need to see it in HD, but yeah, just so we can see what's on the screen.
Means, let me just zoom that quickly. Awesome, great. So the information that I want to pull from the scanned in invoices is obviously the invoice number, the invoice date, all these fancy details. So what we'll do is we'll start at flow.microsoft.com. So what's nice about AI Builder is, like I mentioned before, you can use it both with Power Automate or PowerApps, and you can even use it with both. So it's not an either or, it's an and situation. So once you open flow.microsoft.com, it will open my welcomed with. I think this capability is available if you have a normal Office 365 E5 license and E3. I'm just going to put a disclaimer out there that I'm not going to go into any detail of licensing. It's one of those topics that we avoid, but just know that you can use it. What we're going to do for this demo is we're going to go to the AI Builder tab here on the left, click on Build, and hopefully everything loads fine. I've actually gone through the process to create a model already, just for the sake of time, because sometimes it can take a little while to analyze the data and to train the model, but I'll also show you how easy it is to get the information inside in the model. So obviously this screen is very busy, but what's important is at the top, you've got pre-built models that you can use for AI Builder. It means you literally just go through a step-by-step wizard, and they will guide you through what's needed and how you go about in creating that model. You can also do custom-built models as much as you want. It goes into more specifics here at the bottom. And then for those who are keen to learn more about AI Builder, you've got these cool learning paths that goes to Microsoft Learn. So what we're going to do is the form processing pre-built model. So once you click it, you will notice the first thing to notice is that it's a premium feature. What this means is you're going to have to pay to have it. Once again, not too sure about the licensing requirements, but I know they are. What's also nice is they give you like handy tips as you go. So you can really see that non-technical people will be guided very beautifully as to how to do it. You also, which was cool for me to find out, was you get sample data. So I only found this out after I created my own sample data, so by the way. But nonetheless, here they are. So you can just click on Get Sample Documents, and it will allow you to download a zip file, which will contain sample invoices in both PDF format and JPEG. And then the last tab is best practices. So it will give you some do's and don'ts when using this model. So I think it's very cool how this process just guides you through every step of it. It really makes it easy to use and understandable. It's also in a language, I would say, that's understandable to non-tech people. So to create a model, you would just name it. I'm just going to call it demo. And what you'll see also, what you'll need is 5+ documents with the same layout. I'm going to go and click on create. So what that means is it needs at least 5 documents to train your model. So you can give more documents, but the minimum requirement is 5. Okay. When it says choose information to extract, you would know the format of your PDF or JPEG. And one of the do's and don'ts, what they suggest is to use something or use files that obviously look similar and follow the same look and feel, because obviously if it's all over the show, it would be difficult to train that model, as we know with AI. So here it is as easy as typing invoice number. And you can just press enter once you have the field, invoice date, bill 2, and I'm just going to go invoice amount just for the sake of quickly going to the next step. What's also nice, this is a preview feature, I've played around with it a little bit, is instead of just fields, you can actually add tables of information where you can extract information from tables within a document. So very useful. You can create a table, and then I'll show you just now how you would classify the table once you get to tagging the documents. So let's just go next. So you'll see on the left-hand side as well, it actually asks you to choose the information to extract, which will be your fields. Then you're going to add a collection of documents. That will be your 5 documents minimum. And then we'll go to the next tab, which is tagging the documents, and then model summary. So for now, let's add a new collection. And this will just be demo. And then you can click on the plus. And on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see, you'll see that you can either drag files on there, or you can just add documents from local storage or other resources. You can do it from SharePoint or Azure Blob Storage. Once again, just noting that Azure Blob Storage is a premium feature. So we'll just upload it from local storage. I've got some pre-created invoices that I'll just open. And it will ask me if I want to upload these files, and I'll be yes, let's upload it. So this is the places where it takes a little bit of time, but it's all good. It seems to be fast enough. And then we'll click on Analyze. So while that's busy, is there any questions so far?
No question.
Okay, okay, cool.
Sorry,
No problem. Cool. So while it's busy analyzing, I'll just zoom in here on the top right corner. One of the lessons that I learned the hard way was that you need to make sure that you are in the correct environment. So environments is like your environments that you get dev, prod, QA, those kind of things. And it's very important to be on the right environment, because what's required for AI Builder is a Dataverse database. So that's it was previously known as the Common Data Service. That's required to use AI Builder. And also, what was the other thing? But yeah, you definitely need a Dataverse database. So I chose to save the information to SharePoint. I could have easily chosen to save it to Dataverse, but SharePoint is just so much quicker for me to use because I'm much more familiar with SharePoint. Cool. So once it's analyzed the data, you'll see on the right-hand side, you've got your 5 documents. All 5 of them have these red marks. It means that they need to be tagged. And then what you can do is, I'll just zoom in a little bit on the invoice. And then what you can do is you can actually start tagging your invoices. So you'll see it will highlight a piece of information, and then once it's highlighted, it will show it at the top, and then you can choose what this information is. So this will be the invoice number, and then that one will be the invoice date, and then you can just start tagging the information that you want. So the invoice total. And it's as easy as that. And you would go through this whole process for all 5 of your documents. And then if you were using tables, what you would do is you would highlight a whole section in the table, in the table on the document, and it will actually you can select the table that you've created, and you can start tagging the fields, the individual fields for that table. So very nice. It wasn't useful for this example, but I can think of a few scenarios where you would use that in more complex documents. So you would just go through the process. What would actually happen is the next document, it will tell you that we recognize some fields in the document and automatically tag them for you. So you would see that invoice number, invoice date, and bill to is already tagged. And if you hover over it, you will notice on the right-hand side that it highlights the field. So you can be sure that it actually tagged the correct field that you want. So we'll just go and tag invoice amount.
So that, just a question on that first page, did you just like freehand draw a rectangle and say, hey, this is where the total is and this is where the address is and stuff like that?
Yes.
Is that what you saw?
That is what you saw. So you will see if I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more. So on some, like with the address, I would have to highlight like this whole section. But with the numbers, you'll see that it actually highlights the thing for me, so I don't even have to draw. I can just click on that block and be like, yeah, that's the invoice amount. And then let's say I tag this as the invoice amount, but it was incorrect. I can just click on it again and remove it. It's as simple as that. And then I can go to the right amount and be like, this is the invoice amount.
Carike, that's obviously like a structured PDF. What happens if it's like an image PDF? Does it still work as well?
It still works. It supports any image document or PDF, and then it, as far as I know, but I didn't have the ability to test it, but I think it can even pick up on handwriting and those kind of things. Like it tries its best with a bad scanned file, because you know you get those files that's when they're scanned in, it looks horrible.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, but it does work with that as well.
No, that's pretty impressive.
It is very amazing. Like, it's so easy.
Invoices that look like they've been through people's wallets and stuff. So
yeah, exactly.
It's awesome.
Exactly. And that's the point, hey, because the thing is, from the office point of view, you never know the kind of invoice that you're going to get, because you don't know the capability of the next office, So this just helps. Instead of having to go and manually do things, you have AI Builder and you've got Power Automate that helps you get through these processes quicker, and you actually have time to do what you need to do. So once you've tagged all 5 of the images, you can actually go and start training your model. So while that's busy training, I'm going to just open. I'll just wait for it to say go to model.
Wait, I have a question. Can this organize my Pokemon cards?
It should actually be able to, because it's got objects. I'm going to tell you just now. Let's go to build. I can't remember what the technical name for it is, but it can actually identify objects as well. So it will definitely be able to organize your Pokemon cards. Object detection, nice. That's what it is.
There we go. Nice.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then with the use of Power Automate, I'm sure you will be able to quickly sort that out.
Yes.
Yes. This is us winning at life.
I have very niche requirements, unfortunately.
Cool. So yeah, so whenever you want to build a new model, you just go to build, and then to see your existing models, you just click on models, and hopefully it's going to load now. So here are some of the previous models that I've created. And then obviously to be able to use the model that you've created, it's important that you need to publish that model. Created models is great, but without publishing it, you can't do anything with it. So very important. What is also very cool is you can do a quick test. Before you publish your model, you can actually do a quick test to see if your your model was trained correctly. So what I'll do is I've got my little, imagine this being my little invoice system. So let's just so that you guys know I'm not jippoing anything. Let's make this.
This could have been a recorded demo. You know, think about it. It's all about that fake live. I'm saying you can't say you do it to make us not jippoing it, but I've seen I've seen live recordings of demo fails just to make it look more. more realistic.
I know, but don't jinx it. So let's just change some minor details. We'll keep it at frozen.
Giving away my act there, Matt.
Not just your act, some bigger companies, more official companies, not mentioning any names, but
Okay, cool. So I'll just, for the sake of this demo, just save it into my little test folder that I have here. Obviously, I've done tests before. Come on, guys. I mean, you need to be real as well. Let's just go 19th. And let's go publish that one. Cool. So while that is publishing and probably going to open. Yes. I'm just going to close that because we don't need to view that. Okay, cool. So what I want to do now is just drag that document that I just created into our little quick test. Oh, and it's not there. Oh my gosh. You see, Matt, you jinxed it. Now it's signing into OneDrive at least. Thank goodness.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
My pleasure.
Oh, there we go. Yay! Woo. It's not jinxed completely. Okay, cool. So the document we just created, I'm going to drag into the space just to be sure that our model is getting the correct information. Also, just note, I dragged this into the quick test of a pre-created model that I did just to save time, because as we know, anything can happen, like what just happened. And then what you'll see is as soon as you run your quick test, you'll see that it picks up on the tags and it also gives it a confidence score. At this moment, it doesn't seem too confident. But I'm happy. It seems the tags picked up correctly. So I'm happy with that. And what's nice is you'll see when we build the Power Automate flow also right now is if ever you needed to use the confidence scores, you have access to that information as well. So cool. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to close that. So what we want to do now is we want to actually create a a flow because we want to use this model that we've just built, and we want to, first of all, what I wanted to do is with the use case, like I've mentioned with my aunt, I wanted to, as soon as I actually created a folder here called scanned files. So I want, whenever a scanned document comes in here with a weird name, as you've seen the previous ones were, I wanted to rename it to the invoice number. And then I also want to extract the information and have it saved into SharePoint. So hopefully I can do that without breaking anything. So that's fine. We'll start our flow just now. So to create a flow, you simply click on create. And what we'll do is with Microsoft Flow, it is Power Automate. It's not called Microsoft Flow. Power Automate, you can create flows. And you'll see what is nice is this little hints that pop up when you're using the Power Platform, which I absolutely love, is it really guides you on tips and tricks and information, like if they feel that you're a little lost, which a person quite normally is, they actually guide you. So I'm happy with that. I really enjoy these. And you'll see that you can create a lot of different kind of flows. You can create an automated cloud flow, an instant cloud flow, a scheduled cloud flow, desktop flow, and a business process flow. So all of these have their different features and where you would use them. For this example, we're going to use an automated cloud flow. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a flow name. We'll call it Power Creation Invoice Data Extraction. I can probably put spaces. So, and then we'll search for the trigger. So our trigger is going to be a OneDrive trigger, and it's going to be when a file is created. Okay, so this is what will kick off the workflow and will start the process. So let's click on create. So as you can see, it's a blank canvas. So when a file is created, you can specify the folder where, when a file is created in which folder, and we wanted when it is created in scanned files. Do we want to include subfolders? No. In further content, yes. So then we're going to add a new step. Once again, very important to be in the right environment here at the top, because if you're not, you will not see this AI Builder connector. And this AI Builder connector is important for us to be able to use our models. So if you select AI Builder connector, we are going to use the process and save information from forms. Cool. And then we're going to choose the AI model we want to use. That's why publishing it is so important. Because as you know, or as you now can observe, I didn't publish the demo one I created, and therefore it's not available to be used. So you click on Power Creation Invoices. That's the one we want to use. And then here is the different form types that you can use. Just to add to your question as well, Dustin. So in the event where you've created, let's say, a model with different collections because you want them in PDF format, JPEG, and PNG, you would create an action step for all three of them because you can only select one at this step.
Okay.
So in this case, we're using PDF documents. So if we had PDF and JPEG, or if we had JPEG, this is where we would make that selection.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
So the form that we want to process, you'll see with Power Automate, what I love about it is you get this dynamic content as well. So you don't really have to think much about the information that's required. I would say some knowledge is needed to understand what this information means, because obviously for a non-technical user, they would need to know if you want to do a form, they would need to be able to differentiate, like the form isn't the name or the path, it would be the content. But I'm still like convinced that it's easy enough for anyone to use. And the Power Platform forums is absolutely stunning when it comes to guiding people as well and explaining things. So what we want to do is we want to use the file content that we're getting from this file that's created in OneDrive. And then we're going to add another step, which is going to be a OneDrive action as well, because we want to move or rename OneDrive. We want to move or rename this file that just entered in there if it hasn't got the file of the invoice number. So I just want to get that. There we go. Move or rename a file. And as you can see, it's really easy to get to the actions that you want to use. It's just typing in a few bits of it, and then you can scroll through all the options that's available. So for the file, the unique identifier for the file, once again, we're going to use the dynamic content on the right that pops up. And we want to use the file identifier. And the destination file path, we want to use, I'm just going to manually enter the path for now. Scan files. You could easily make this destination file path a variable within the workflow. I was a little bit too lazy to do that. Please excuse me for being lazy. So now what we want to do is, in the destination file path, I want to get the file that we've identified that was created and rename it to the invoice number value. And then you have to put .pdf at the moment, because what I've learned previously while testing it is it's not clever enough to know that this is a PDF file. So if you don't include the .pdf, or in other cases the .jpeg or PNG, it would save it without a file extension. So it's very important to put this here. And do we want to overwrite the file? Yes, we do. Okay. Then the last step is, because now we've created a scanned file, you can either drag them in bulk, or you can do one by one, maybe set up the printer to scan the files to that destination. We've got our model that we want to use. We've renamed the file. And the last step we want to do is to create this entry into SharePoint. So now we'll go SharePoint. And we want to create an item. Cool. From the model, because now you can just easily use those fields. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose our SharePoint site that we want to add this to. It's going to be Power Creations. The list name that we want to add this to is going to be Invoices Issued. And then we've got advanced options, and here we've got all the fields, and then you can just start populating your fields with the dynamic content from AI Builder. So for title, I chose the invoice number value. For invoice date, we'll use the invoice date value. It's important to use the values. Obviously, you don't want to use the display name. You want to use the actual value that's gathered from that document. The bill to will be your bill to. Where's that one? Did I miss it? There's the address. Bill to value. There we go. Address. Just want to scroll down a little bit. Address value, contact number, value. And as you all can see, I mean, it's really easy to tag these what can I say, the fields from the document, and then it's very easy to just use them. And you can take this information and store it wherever you like, to be honest. Like I said, I'm just more familiar with SharePoint, and therefore I use SharePoint. Service fee value, I don't know if I missed that one. Let me just go service fee value. This will be much easier. Labor total value, client discount, and text total. And then the invoice total. Amount value. There we go. Cool. So that's all we want. When a file is created, we want them to use the model, rename that identified file to the invoice number, and then add the item to SharePoint with all the fields that we wanted to use. So once we're happy, we're going to save our workflow. And then I'm going to just go back to the previous page once it's saved, because I just want to deactivate my test workflow that I've got here so that they don't clash. So let's go this one. I want to turn off. There we go. So this one is on. We can see it's on here. You can see it's on. If I click on that, it's going to turn it off, but we want it to be on. Also, another section to focus on is the connections that's being made for this Power Automate to work. It's making a connection point to Microsoft Dataverse, OneDrive for Business, and SharePoint. And as you can see, it's using an admin account. So what's advised here is to make use of service accounts. Reason being that anything can happen if it's connected to your personal account and someone decides to leave the company. No one else will be able to take it over from you unless you've shared this Power Automate and gave someone else also owner permissions to this Power Automate. But it's preferred that, or suggested that you use service accounts when setting up these connections. Cool. So now what we want to do is we know that we've got it. So now the proof is in the pudding, right? So I've got the scanned files OneDrive, and then I've got my test files. So what I want to do is I just simply want to move this one over to here. I'm just going to minimize that, open SharePoint, and then just open that again so that you can actually see how it changes the name. So sometimes what I found with Power Automate is it gives you a bit of a fright because it takes a while to start, and then you kind of get like a anxiety moment, and then it works. And then you're like, oh, okay, it works. So just be patient. It does sometimes take. So at this moment, I'm also hoping, I'm just checking that it's starting. Let's just see. What I'm going to do is on my flow, you can see at the bottom here, you can just refresh to see the runs, the recent runs. So hopefully it starts running soon because it is on. Is there any questions so far?
I don't think so.
No, it doesn't look like any questions.
Okay.
So you must be covering all the content 100%.
Yeah.
100%, like that's super. I'm seeing that the OneDrive that this thing is not connected, so I just want to see that it signs in quickly, because that's probably why the workflow isn't starting. Let's just see. I'm going to close it and then just open it again.
So it's got that little swirly thing there saying that it's like uploading. I mean, how big is that invoice? Is it like you ordered a house and every single screw separately?
No, it's like 58.5 kilobytes. Okay, but the fact that it's showing the swirly is great. So let's hope that it's going to do something now.
If you think about it, you're like streaming your voice and picture, so it's not like your internet's not working.
Exactly.
You could also maybe try
Exactly.
logging into
OneDrive
OneDrive on like .com, because
Yeah, I should actually.
Yeah.
Let's
Wait,
just see. Properties.
If you do the one that's in the notification bar at the bottom, that normally has the right-click view online, which does the quick launch.
The quick launch. Okay, cool. So let me just rather do it this way and let's see. So I can at least just access OneDrive.
as soon as you put that in, both are going to run. It's all about getting you to
Yeah,
do
hey?
it.
See, these things. That's the thing of doing
No,
things live, hey? You always get some exciting times.
Totally cool. This is why I recorded my very awkward Chromecast demo.
You see. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag that one into there, since we have got it online now.
I'm just waiting for my name to pop up because I know you put my name in there. Oh,
Yeah,
oh
it
was that
seems
just for the
to-
test, not for this one?
That was, yeah, it's not for this one.
Oh, man. Okay.
I'll make you a new one.
Must hook this up to a Twitter bot. So every time you upload an invoice, it's immediately like, I just billed someone, X amount.
100%. So I actually hope that if I do this, that it will show both. Given that the invoice is issued. So we want to see if the flow is running already. Yay! And it succeeded. And then there's nothing. That is interesting. Oh, it's probably because I've used one that was existing. So, okay, let's just go to the invoice one again, just to be sure. So, Sweekie, the invoice will be sent to you promptly.
Yes. Never been excited more to pay money. Yes.
We'll invoice it to that Pokemon cards one. That will be the service. So let's just publish that.
So Sweekie, that's another reason to come to South Africa, is to pay your invoice.
There we go.
That I know, you're just like adding, the list just keeps getting longer. Yep.
If you need any more motivation, just let us know.
Will do. Will do.
Cool. So there's that one. Let's upload it. Uploading an item. The suspense. Whew. Anywho, hopefully you'll be able to see how the changes are put in here.
It's tense, this. Keep making the window small to cut off any content, just keeping us waiting.
Yeah.
Let me drag the window on the screen. Whoops, but not big enough for you to see.
Yeah.
There it is.
There
That's
you go.
Pocahontas, Anna, and Elsa.
You see, it's all about Disney. Oh, you'll be able to see that it refreshed now. We've got Anna and Elsa. No, but that's not the one that we created. We want Sweekie's one. There we go. We've got a workflow running, people. Yes. Woohoo! Woohoo!
I don't know why I'm so excited on this side. I'm like, yes. I'm like, what if I? It's a test run.
That's probably how the people feel when they invoice people. So we're just experiencing that. We're getting into character.
Yeah, I saw it pop up on the side.
Yes.
Yeah, I see my name. Yes.
Some pay. Sweetie, it's pay time.
Dang it.
Guys,
Yes.
as easy as that. well, not that it was at all easy because pressure, but anywho, that was the demo. So let's recap on the lessons learned. Well, there's probably now more that I did the live one than this little 3 here. But number one is always make sure that you're working in the correct environment. If you are not and you start building your workflow, you will not see your model and you will not see the AI Builder connectors. The point where I mentioned AI Builder requires a Dataverse database. You cannot use the AI models without a database, the Dataverse database specifically. And if you do not see the AI Builder actions in your Power Automate flow, check your environment, also known as point number one. And then just some resources that you can look at. There's an awesome course that Rory Neary created. It covers absolutely everything Power Platform. So please have a look at that. It's really, really helpful if you want to learn more about Power Platform. And he also keeps on adding new content. So as new functionality becomes available, he puts it in there and it's completely free. You can also visit Microsoft Docs to learn more about, AI Builder. I've used Vertex 42 for my free invoice templates for those needing free invoice templates, but Microsoft provides them, so no need. And then also Microsoft Docs Power Automate, AI Builder ideas if you want to see what other people are building or maybe issues people are having, maybe you can relate to that. Then PowerApps, the Power Platform community has a demo extravaganza that's happening at the moment. There's always cool apps. Sweeky, your Pokemon organizer app, there will be, I think last year someone actually built something with the Pokemon with mixed reality. So yeah, these people come up with amazing apps. So do give that a check out as well. And then the Microsoft Business Application Summit that has passed already also has awesome content on the Power Platform, and you can check out all the latest things that's coming to the Microsoft Power Platform right there. And then you can check out the Power Apps community blog, where you can find absolutely anything and anything. And just maybe if you want to talk to someone about Power Apps. And that is me. Thank you.
And I'm just thinking now Microsoft has a lot of the stuff on Microsoft Learn, like, the step-by-step tutorial where they, you do some stuff, click a button, they got like, do they have things like that for the Power Platform features?
Yes, I actually have a lot of that. They've got labs on GitHub as well that you can follow. That actually Microsoft Learn, I think, refers to some of those as well.
Awesome.
So there are also the app in a days thing for everything.
Yes.
Yeah. So Carike, that was amazing, and I don't see any questions because you have explained it pretty well. But yes, thank you for being with us today. It was so wonderful to see that demo, and then finally the flow ran and we all went, yay!
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah, so thank you again, and to the amazing people who are listening to this, please follow her on Twitter as well as on LinkedIn, and do tell her how she did today, and do provide an honest feedback that will boost Carike to join us again on the Doug next time.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you. And with that, I'm gonna hand over it to Gordon. Hi, Gordon.
How's it? Like
How are
super
you?
nervous for some reason. I'm good at yourself. Normally it's not like a nerves thing, so I don't know, something's up. I think it's because Matt was like calling out the demo files in videos earlier. Like, damn it, I have some of those. They're supposed to be authentic, but we'll see.
No worries. The demo gods will be with you tonight as well. Okay,
Cool.
the stage is all yours.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm Gordon Beaming. I'm going to chat to everyone tonight about developing software for the modern world using only your browser and GitHub. It's quite fast-paced because video can do that, which is amazing. So if you do miss something, you can potentially have to check the recording and or look at it at my Twitter at about 20 past 8 for an otherwise recorded version of this. So who am I? I'm a software guy at Durifco, also Microsoft MVP, focusing on DevOps, and I do some running stuff, admittedly not as much as I would like to, and do lots of things with the kids. Luckily that still happens now in COVID. And then a quick selfless punt, a session that sort of is more in depth than the session I'm doing today at the end of June with one of the Durifco webinars. We're covering dev containers, depender bots, and other like more advanced features of GitHub specifically that you could find quite interesting. Cool. So this session, quick overview of what we'll be covering. So I'll be going through GitHub code spaces. The sample app will be using .NET 5 and SQL 2019. We'll be playing with LiveShare a little bit. We'll build a Docker container because apparently everything's better in containers. We're using some Azure CLI, Kubernetes, GitHub Actions, and then if you know any of the tech above there, you know we're going to be using a lot of PowerShell and YAML. Cool. So GitHub code spaces. They're
Gordon,
pretty amazing.
Are you sharing anything?
I am. Oh, I'm not. I am, but I'm not. But I am. You know, life is hard.
Just checking.
I was wondering. I was like, I don't see a red thing. No, when I said I was nervous, this is probably the reason why, because I've actually forgotten how to just do live. You know.
Well, now you've had the fail, so now there's no worries. No, it's like you can't go further downhill. Like, how can you share less than nothing? Is this the right camera?
Valid point.
Is this the right camera coming from below? I'm just checking to see maybe the camera you guys some sort of epic angle.
There you go. See, so it should work.
Yeah, we can see that.
I ever made a colorful slide for the PowerShell and YAML. Come on, guys. And because there it is. The PowerShell's in blue. That's as far as my design skills go. And because I have to do the selfless punt back, you know, in the top right, there's the link for the thing that I was showing. Hey, look how professional that looks.
Cool.
Very much not like the rest of the presentation. Cool. Now let's pretend I do this all the time, shall we?
And action.
And action. Nothing to see here, guys. See, that's why if I pre-recorded this, that wouldn't have happened, because it would have all just been okay. But anyway, cool. Let's look at GitHub code spaces. So GitHub code space is really cool. It's basically VS Code hosted in the browser in the browser, not in the browser. So it's in machines in GitHub's side of the cloud, and you can do amazing things in them, as you'll see very soon. So the demo that I'm going to do on GitHub code spaces, we'll start off, we'll create a new repo. We'll open that repo in code spaces. We'll then create a .NET 5 web app, and then we'll pretend that we need help from a friend so that we can use LiveShare, and then we'll create a dev container for SQL Server as part of our sort of dev flow, all inside GitHub code spaces. So if we take a look at what that looks like, all the scripts that I'm referencing are on my GitHub. So if you go to my profile and then demos, they're all there with a whole bunch of reference docs. So for now, I'm going to use the sort of name that GitHub suggests. So this project's going to be called Demo Glowing Waffle, because that's really cool. We're going to use a README. We're going to use the Visual Studio Gitignore as our way to get started. And we're going to use the MIT license and go ahead and click Create. We're then going to go to the sort of like the Get Code button, open a container. We don't have any containers yet, so we're going to click, or any code spaces, so we can click New Code Space. This then goes and fires up a lot of magic. And if you've used VS Code before, the first thing you'll probably notice is this opened up blue, and the reason for that is because my GitHub account syncs my settings. So when this opened, it knew automatically that because it is me, that it should use my settings. Down the left, you can see all my extensions that are installed. You can see the icons just popped up because that's the icon pack that I have. And then off my machine, those scripts that I mentioned, I've just dragged that now from my local machine into VS Code, which is in the browser on a machine, probably in Europe somewhere. Actually, this will probably be in North America, but anyway, I get lost. So it's a sort of dev experience like you'd expect if you're running this locally, right? And then for the terminal, I just switched there to PowerShell because I prefer PowerShell over Bash. Cool. So the first bit I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new git ignore, just one that comes with the .NET template. There's a couple of small things in there, so it has some ignores set up for Mac as well as for the VS Code file, which don't come in the normal one. And then just to show you when I do push stuff and it just runs, those are the normal shortcuts of F8 and F5 to execute either selected code or the whole file. So there's a little diff showing you the extra bits and pieces that's in the ignore file. Nothing really important, but more showing you why I did that after I previously had asked for an ignore file. So next we're going to go ahead and create our app. So we're going to create a source folder, then create a web app folder inside there, and then we're going to create a MVC .NET 5 app using local DB with individual auth. And then we're going to go ahead and run a watch. And then from the little pop-up there, you can see it says, hey, there's new ports that have been exposed. And if you've done any local dev with .NET, you'd know that normally, or .NET Core, you get your port 5000, which is your insecure ports, and then 5001, which is your secure. What you can see there is I launched the 5000 ports, and that redirected onto 5001 as it would on a normal environment, but the reverse proxy obviously doesn't cater for that. So if I go ahead and launch the 5001 proxy, or 5001 port, you can see this works fine, and that's giving me that sort of dev experience that I can go and debug this. If I go and open this in a incognito window, you can see it does ask me for auth. So that link, the fact that I can just browse to it in my browser, it doesn't mean it's exposed over the internet to everyone else. And then because later on this is important, you'd see I clicked on the bookmark for local 5001, and it doesn't work. As we saw with the redirects earlier, that port doesn't work. Cool. So next up, what are we doing next up? I think this is the part where we get some help from a friend. So I'm going to head over to LiveShare, and I'm going to click share. Because this instance hasn't been authenticated with LiveShare yet, I need to pop out to go do that auth. So this will just ask me if I'm okay with it. Because I'm already authenticated in this browser with GitHub, I don't have to re-enter my credentials. So that lets me in the door. And then I'm able to get a collaboration link, which I can share with a friend. And this is one of two parts where I'm not in the browser, but it's more just to show you what it could look like from someone else coming from somewhere else. So I'm bringing up a Visual Studio Insiders instance, and in this IDE, I'm signed in as the Dada bot. So I'm going to go ahead and click join, and I paste in the link which I copied from the GitHub Codespaces session on the left. You'll see at the bottom of the screen there, it's mentioned that the Dada bot has joined the session. You can see the Insider instance on the right is obviously part of that session. So when I navigate around the left, you can see it showed where I was in the IDE. I'm going to go ahead and just change that a little bit. So I'm going to, from the bots side, say, well, unfollow Gordon Beaming. And then on the left-hand side, I'm going to go and say, well, follow the participants. So sort of when the sort of person invited in, the guest browses around, I want to see where they are, which is going to be helpful for just now. And then that 5001 link that I mentioned earlier, You see I've just launched that now on localhost 5001, and now that works. And the reason for that is part of that live share session on port 5001 on my local machine, it's now proxying through to the GitHub proxy, which is proxying into the machine that I'm running off. So you can see as someone joining that session, I get a full experience as if I was sort of sitting behind the person, and we're sort of doing a full-on peer programming. So to test that the sort of experience works, if you will, I'm going to go ahead and make some changes. So you can see on the right hand side, I've gone to the CSS file and I'm going to make the background green. And you can see in the left how it's following me around. So wherever I am, it's showing me that, showing the owner of the session. That's where I am. That's what I'm typing. If I go after saving that and refresh the browser, you can see it's green. And if I go refresh the sort of the left Windows browser, it's also green now. Because when I change that code, it's not actually changing on my machine. It is changing inside the host, and that's how other participants would see that. Cool. And then the other thing that's quite cool is that the terminal also syncs. So we're going to go ahead here and log in. And again, if you've played with the .NET apps, you'd know generally if you just sign in, if you have a DB connection, it'll ask you to apply migrations. But in this case, it's saying that local DB is not supported on the current platform. So as the sort of person that's helping out on the right, I'm like, okay, I know what that is. I'm going to go ahead and help you with that. But assuming I wasn't sitting by the guy and seeing his log, I've got the log there in the terminal, which I can scroll through, and you'll see it. I come up to the point where it's like, okay, this is not supported. Even though in the specific instance that did display on in the browser, it's more just illustrating the fact that I do have full access to a terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and edit the connection string to localhost 1420. Let's pretend as our standard that is what we use for dev at this company. And we're going to use the user ID SA and the password we're going to get from the PowerShell script that we normally set up our local SQL dev instance with. So as you can see, it's a very strong password. Oh, sorry, this one's not a very strong one. This is just a strong password. So we'll go ahead and save that, switch back over to the browser, refresh that to resend that same request through. And this time we're going to see something else. It's just going to crash altogether because it can't find where it's trying to go. So you see in the terminal on the right there, we're getting some feedback of some information around that specifically. So it's at this point you potentially say to the guy, hey, have you set up the SQL file? And he's like, actually, no, I'm a moron. So at this point, on the left-hand side, so at the moment, and I'll show it later, the terminal on the right is in read-only mode. So you are able to expose that as read-write. But for now, on the left-hand side, I'm going to go ahead and pull the SQL 2019 Linux image down to my machine, which is actually obviously to that code space. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a new SQL container locally using that same image. So you can see on the right, as I've highlighted a bunch of text on the left, it's showing me like exactly where I'm highlighting, and I'm again getting that feedback through the terminal. And in the left window, it's popped up saying, hey, there's a new port that you can access. So now if I go back to the browser again and I resubmit that same request, this time it should be better. So one of the things that we need to do obviously is start that watch again. And when we go back to the browser, life should be happy. So you can see now it says apply migrations. And ordinarily you would just click apply migrations. But in this organization, we seem to care about what happens when this goes to production, because when it's running in production, you don't have that button, right? So we say there's this magic bit of script or code that you can just add to the end of the configure services method, which will basically run through and apply migrations for us. It's not super fancy, but it illustrates the point quite well. Go ahead and refresh that. There we go. Try sign in again, and this time instead of it crashing, we'll just get a message saying invalid login attempt. And the fact that we're seeing that means that it has actually now done the DB call and there wasn't a login for this user available. So I'm going to go ahead and again, this is what I mentioned earlier with the terminals. You can see they're all in read-only mode, but if we had to right-click there, you can say we can move that to read-write, so that the person on the right can control that. So that's live share. I'm going to kill that collaboration quickly, and then bump up the font size just so it's slightly better. Kill the live share session from the host. And then the last thing that we need to do, oh, come on, brain. Actually, I think that was the last thing. That is the last thing we need to do. Cool. So then building a Docker container, this part is probably the easiest with simple stuff, probably one of the harder things to do with more complex systems. In our demo though, we're going to have a very basic Docker file, which is just going to package up our web app. To put something into that Docker file, we need to have obviously some artifacts. So we're going to start it off from all the commands that we would use later down the pipeline when we need to restore any packages, do the build, and then publish. So I'm going to open up the build PS1 inside the app setup folder. And as I mentioned, we're going to run through those commands. Nothing complicated yet. We're just making sure that things work as expected. So we've run the restore, that works fine. I run the build. The build's also running through fine. And then we're going to go ahead and run the package, the publish. So publish runs, and then in the top left-hand corner there, you can see we have a new folder called artifacts, and there is our published binaries. If we go ahead and look inside the Docker file, you can see it does a very simple copy from our artifacts folder into app directory. And what we're going to do is create that build folder, copy the Docker file into that build folder, and then we're going to run the Docker build using that same Docker file, and we're just going to tag as dev. And that should run through fine because it is very simple. And then that's done. Obviously the last bit that we need to do is just commit this. So add the Docker file and then commit that. Cool. So the next part in this chain of doing awesome things is the Azure CLI. So the Azure CLI lets you, through command line, basically do almost anything within Azure. And in our case here, we're going to demo that just by creating a couple of resources. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure our tooling's up to date, because on the different docs, they do mention different minimum tool versions that are required for different things. Generally, before you start doing something, you make sure your tool's up to date, you won't go wrong. Then we're going to create an AKS cluster. We're going to, in the prompts, it's going to warn us, because we do pass in the args to generate new SSH keys. So as a warning, they say, hey, make sure that you back up those keys. So we're going to back up those keys. We're going to create a storage account to do that too, and then we're going to create an Azure container registry, which is what we're going to house the Docker container in later on. As a starting point, I've got a file here, says the check account. So this is doing some basic things. So checking the version, make sure that we're good. It suggests we could run the AZ upgrade. There is some issues with running that command, some known issues of a couple of years where that sort of bugs out and halts. And it's got something to do with a university version of something or other. And the Azure CLI tools being included there. So the recommendation is just to remove Azure CLI and then install it again. So that's what I did. Next, we're going to effectively log into Azure. So you can see it's given us a code. We're going to open up that link. And then we're going to paste the code in there. Hit next. It's going to ask us who we are. We already logged into the browser, so we can just click on our identity. And then we are all authed up. So you see it retrieves our subscriptions. I'm going to go ahead and specifically choose this subscription that I do want the context of all these commands to run in. And then for our demo, we need 2 providers to be active. So we're going to run that and just make sure they are registered, which they currently are. If they weren't, we would be able to run the provider register and pass in the namespace to register those in our subscription. For variables, we have a bunch of variables for different things. So the location that we want to put stuff, what our cluster name is, variables building on other variables, what our SQL password is, and a whole bunch of stuff. So we're just going to hit run on that to get those variables configured up for us. The next bit, create the cluster. So we've got 2 lines at the top there. The first one is going to create us a resource group. And the second will create us a AKS cluster. Inside that resource group, you can see from the args that we're passing in there, we are telling it to generate the SSH keys. But we specifically have commented out the attach ACR, so the Azure Container Registry. That's because we haven't made it yet. And the reason I didn't create that first is I wanted to demonstrate how we could attach that later on if we didn't create it up front. Next up, we're going to back up the SSH keys. So we're going to create a storage account. We're then going to list all our storage accounts, grab the, we're going to list the specific account. We're going to grab the key from it, and then we're going to use that key to upload the 2 blobs for our SSH key to the storage account. Sorry, with creating the container before that. So that shouldn't take too long to run. In presentation mode, in real life mode, it takes slightly longer, which is less than ideal. Cool. And those 2 last lines there where it's saying finished and finish, that's the progress bar of uploading those blobs if you were to run that line by line. The next step, we want to create that Azure Container Registry. Again, the first line is creating that. We're then using the response to new up some other variables. And then that line 5 is updating our Kubernetes or resource with the container registry that we've just created. You can see there's almost lots of repetition. It's like AZ, whatever the resource is, very common verbs, create, update, and then generally your resource group and the name of the thing you're targeting, and then some optional parameters on the rest. And then I'm just showing that if we did need to restore, there's the sort of the scripts to restore, but we don't really need to do that in our case, so we're not going to run anything there. Cool. Now that we've created a bunch of artifacts in Azure, and I'm assuming there's no questions, right? Or I'm hoping this is a pause-friendly zone at the moment.
No, it doesn't seem to be any questions.
Awesome. Cool. So we've gone and created our Azure resources. We're now going to go put stuff inside of them. So the first thing we're going to do is create a SQL 2019 service using persisted volume claim. And then we're going to create a web app service that's going to sit with that for the application we just created. So if we look at a bunch YAML that describes what our deployment and our persistent volume looks like. Again, you can go look at these in the repo. It's lots of text to explain, and Kubernetes is not a fun thing to understand. But basically, it's YAML describing how things should be set up, very similar to what the ARM templates look like. In this PowerShell script, we're going to first import the public SQL 2019 image to our container registry. We're then going to apply the deployment for our persistent volume claim, and then we're going to create some secrets for the SQL password as well as a SQL connection string, which we'll use as part of the web app, and then we deploy our SQL deployment. You can see at the bottom there we were doing a get pod to check when it was running. Now that it is running, we did get services to get the external IP. This is the last other time where we use a different thing to cheat, and it's just because it's easier to show the data visually. So we brought across Azure Data Studio there, and just to connect to it to show that it is a proper database. And if you trust the Azure or the PowerShell bits that they're doing, the things that they say they're going to do, you would trust that this lives in Azure, hopefully. So we can go ahead and just make a new query. Again, just illustrating that it is real, not fake magics happening here. Not yet, at least. So we'll just go ahead and select from all the databases. And this little test is an interesting one to do, because if your config is a bit broken, you would be able to select those databases and things would work. But then when you create database, it would fail because it potentially doesn't have the right access to where it needs to write to. And it's a weird thing of the sort of running state versus the initial create state that the container finds itself in. Cool. So what next? We need to just look at the website quickly. So again, it's much of the same repetition. In this case, we're using the web app container, which we haven't yet published to our container registry. We're passing in the variable for the connection string. And then this PowerShell file looks pretty much the same. We're going to apply that website YAML. And this time when we get the status of the pod, we'll see that it errors out. And the reason for that is obviously we haven't published the container, so you can see the error image pool. So that's fine. We'll use this later on. Cool. And then moving on to GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions is pretty awesome. If you're familiar with the with Azure pipelines, it's close to the same tech. The one amazing thing about GitHub Actions is you can trigger it off almost, well, I think it is actually off any GitHub event. So you can do your traditional things like off code pushes, PRs, but then you can do other things like when a branch is deleted, or when someone creates a new issue, or someone deletes an issue or edits an issue, as well as it can also be triggered off your sort of more common things like a schedule or just manually running it. It's very, very flexible piece of framework that they've got there. For the action itself, there's nothing too complicated in the sort of concept of what we're doing. We're going to build our software the same way as we did inside the code space. We're going to package it pretty much in the same way by running a Docker build. We're just going to tag it slightly differently, and then we're going to push the tags, and then we're going to deploy it into our cluster. And we start off by creating a new workflow file. So we went and said create new file. We put the full path of that file, so that created the folders for us and the file. We're then going to create or copy the sample that we've got, and then just walk through that and see what that looks like. So we'll start off at the top. So you've got the name. The name of this is going to be build and publish. This triggers on any pushes to the master branch. It's going to run on Ubuntu agent. It's going to check out the code, set up the .NET version that we need to use, and then it's going to update the version. And for that, for the specific way we're doing it, we need to add a version tag to our CS proj file. So we're just going to go add that in. The version number doesn't really matter, but it always defaulted to 0001. The next bit that it does is that same restore build publish that we did inside the code space. And then it runs into some more familiar things. So we're going to then log into the Azure CLI. We're going to pass in some secrets, some GitHub secrets there, which we'll go ahead and configure soon. We then do the Docker build the same way as we did in the code space, and then we have 2 Docker pushes. The build, we are tagging it twice, so once with latest and once with the build number. So we're going to push both those tags when we do our push. And then we're going to deploy to the cluster, again using a whole bunch of secrets, which there is a script that gets all those secrets in this demo. So the script starts off at the top and it creates a service principal for us inside Azure DevOps. It then goes and grabs our kube config as well as information from that principal and writes all of that out along with some other IDs and stuff to the console. Each sort of variable name is a hash space variable name. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and grab, so in this case, Azure credentials, head over to our repo to the secrets, paste the name in, grab the bit of value that's under that, paste that in, add the secret, and we're going to repeat for everything else that's in there. So because I can move fast, I'm just going to go and put those all in there because the values themselves are almost irrelevant. The fact is we've put a bunch of the config in there. And then I think I just clicked a interesting thing. 1 second. Did I do bad things? I think I did bad things. I did bad things, guys.
Looks very interesting.
I did bad things, I think. Let's see if I did bad things. I think I touched a thing. Let's see. I did touch a bad thing. Let's try from, yeah. Is this before or after I do copy craziness? I think it's there. Sorry about that. Yeah, sure. Apparently don't play with the clicker underneath the table. I'm busy spinning it in my hands and I tap the go next. And my builds run faster than most people's builds. You can see the seconds tick up like amazingly there. And this was the part where Matt was saying, hey, there's fails on purpose. So somewhere along the line, I reverted the change for the Docker file. And that broke things. And you missed that part now because I happened to click in the right part of the video. But in between there, I went basically and switched that Docker file. So you can see that the build folder is open. Somehow I moved that Docker file back out again. And things didn't work great. But luckily I switched to the right part of the video and it just worked. From the Get pods, you can see that all of our web apps are running now, not in a broken state like they were earlier. So we'll grab the external IP for that the same way as we did for SQL. We'll browse to it, and when we hit login, we would expect that it doesn't break because we put that magic code in the startup file. And there we go, it says invalid login attempt. So from us running through this earlier in localhost, we can understand that we do have a connection to the database. And if we go there and select all the databases, you can see that we do have demo prod, which was the name of our production database. And if we went and look in there, you can see all the tables have been generated, which is the standard tables that get created with the identity. Cool. And now we go to resource cleanup. So cleaning up stuff, especially when you're doing demos, is very important. I decided to add this to my demo so I don't forget to do the cleanup. And the reason for that is because when Azure CLI first came, well, not when it first came out, but when it first came out that I could use it on my cell phone, I was running around one of the dev days that we had, showing everyone that I could create Kubernetes clusters from my cell phone. And I created quite a number of them that weren't light machines, and that burned through a lot of my Azure credits extremely fast. So I'll show you how simple it is to clean up your resources, so that hopefully you don't run into a similar mistake, because it's not hard. There was a lot to set up, but tearing it down is extremely simple. You target the resource group that we put everything into in this example. You remove that, and then everything else will go. And then we're going to remove the GitHub code space as well. So one thing I didn't do in all of this is show anyone what the resources look like in Azure. So we'll just go through and take a look at that quickly, just to, I don't know, hope that me only showing you an afterwards thing makes you believe that before there was nothing there, I guess. But if you look at the containers, you can see that we have the server and the web app. And when we checked in there, we had the version .2, which represents the fail of .1 when I messed up the Docker file. If we go to the workloads, you can see there's our MS SQL inst and our Azure websites. So those do exist. So everything that we've created in the last 36 minutes with the press of an F8, passing in the args of -- yes and -- no wait, will tell Azure to go and tear down that resource group for us and say we don't actually care about it anymore. So the last little thing I want to show you around code spaces is I'm just going to add a small comment. This is some description, and then I'm going to head over to the repo. So if you are in the code space like we are now, you can click on this code spaces in the bottom left, and you can click go to repo from there, and that will navigate out to your repo. If we then go open code spaces again and we go to the config, you can see there that it shows us that we do have one commit that's waiting to be pushed. From the sort of options menu, we can export those changes to a branch, so we don't have to go into the code space to get at it. And when we try and delete it, it does tell us that, hey, you do have changes pending. Are you sure you want to delete this? Cool. And then, so a last little thing, because I thought if anyone is like me, they're most likely watching those demos, pulling their hair out, saying, that's terrible practice, which it is. There's lots of shortcuts that were taken. And because when you're doing a lightning talk, it's sort of, you can't do everything by the rules, because otherwise it's just too much. Kubernetes on its own is a couple of days to go through it in depth. So it sort of doesn't make sense to follow to the T. So yes, if you've followed along with that and you go through all the resources, links that I share, or from the demo sites, the things you'll want to look at to do what I've shown properly is most likely ARM templates. So instead of using the Azure CLI and just creating all the resources sort of ad hoc in a very monitored way, there's like absolutely no traceability in the way we created those. Well, I suppose from the audits in the Azure portal you'll see that, but there's sort of no configures code or anything like that. So you want to look at ARM templates. It allows you to define what your resources look like, and in a similar way that we applied our files against the Kubernetes cluster, you can do the same thing against Azure and basically apply it and say, this is what my infrastructure should look like, and it will spin that up for you based off your ARM template. And then to do your Kubernetes properly, you want to do a very similar thing. You want to go set up a whole bunch of Helm charts that take in parameters, and everything's awesome and great, and then go and do that properly. I didn't show that, because that's when YAML really gets too much when you start playing and understanding that a lot. The next thing is when we accessed our web app, we did that through an external IP address. You're not going to be able to give your customers that and say, hey, go use my site. Well, I suppose you could, but it's not going to be great for your business. So go look at the HTTPS ingress controllers if you are doing this inside Azure. And then one of the reasons guys or people generally go for Kubernetes is because it allows a lot of interesting config very easily for redundancy. In our case, we just ran with one node, so we didn't really have any of the promise of redundancy. If that went down, we were down. So you really want to go look into all the options that you have for redundancy in Kubernetes. Around dev and test, there's Azure Dev Spaces, which is going to be replaced by a bridge to Kubernetes. Azure Dev Spaces will still be around. I think it's till October 2023. So there's still some time on that. But yeah, go check those out. And then you'll definitely want to put more, or like I say, any really quality gates. So I mean, in this case, generally your simplest of simple demos at least still run unit tests of no unit tests. But I even removed that out just to keep it that a little bit simpler. So you want to look at having approval gates, whether those be automated or manual. You want to be doing some integration tests and other automated tests, potentially blue-green deployments to make sure your stuff gets into production in a safe manner. You don't want to be sort of automating, putting crap into production fast. Then some resources. As I mentioned, the repo with all the scripts is the first one there. The others sort of point to the different areas of topics that I spoke about. And obviously when you go to the scripts is more of like the Microsoft Docs and Docker Docs and the Kubernetes Docs, pointing through specific concepts that were used throughout the presentation. And then that brings me to the end. Like I said, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, and if you go to beaming.dev, you can find me or find all the other random places that I am. So is there any questions, Alan, or is it just too late for people to be interested in questions?
No, we
Is-
don't
is
have
it-
any questions at the moment.
Either people fall asleep at their computer or they stay stuck around. I've been checking every now and again the number of attendees that stay stable. So that's nice. Okay.
Now I'm checking here, there's no questions, but we are marveling at your design skills. You lied to us. You said that blue text was the extent of your design skills, but these are very fancy coffee beans.
So
Very
do
cool.
you want to know the most amazing feature? If I can just, you know, I'm assuming everyone knows about design ideas, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like
we are using
this,
it.
this stuff definitely comes from that. I go and take something random, put it on there, I paste in a random image, and then I click down, until it shows something that I think is going to look great, and then I use that.
Yeah,
It's like
Yeah,
using the
I know
same
people are
AI that
awesome.
Carike was doing. Stick on AI.
There is another interesting thing that I found, which I didn't know that existed. When you go right-click New Slide, you can say Reuse Slide. And because this is inside my OneDrive, it goes through my OneDrive. I don't know if it's specifically because it's in my OneDrive for Business, but it goes through the OneDrive for Business and shows me all other previous slides that are things I might want to include, which I thought was like flipping insane, because I normally go and like manually try and find a slide and then like bring it across. But it's like baked into PowerPoint that it will be stalkery for you and bring stuff, which is amazing.
Very cool.
Something definitely to look into.
Yeah, putting a new perspective to the slides now.
It's a competition.
Okay, so Gordon, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really got to see something which we don't know other than the presentation slides. And for people who are listening this, do follow him on Twitter and on LinkedIn, follow his blog post. And with that, I would like to tell you a big thank you again to .NET Foundation, Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg Microsoft user group. If you still want to be our next speaker, please go on those sessionized links or just come on my Twitter page and then you'll get the call for speakers link. A big thank you again, and we hope to look forward to you in our next networking stream, which is at aka.ms/msdoug networking. We all are going to join that site, so see you that side. There is no questions. You can turn on your mic and camera and you can just eat as well with us. So see you soon on the other side. Thank you and have a good night.